Today is Wednesday, February 9th, and we will begin the Energy and the Environment Committee. I'm going to ask if there's any additional speaker cards that are going to be filled out in item 1 by anybody, because I would like to, if it's okay with folks, take the speaker cards first, and then we will bring up our nominee. Let's go ahead and bring up Mr. Prieto, if you could announce the measure that we're on right now.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Rafael Prieto with the CLA's office. Item number 1, Board of Water and Power Commissioners report and resolution relative to the appointment of Ms. Marcy Edwards as General Manager, Department of Water and Power.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Prieto. Let's go ahead and take public comment on this item. Tim Brick, Jasmine Vargas, Elsa Barbosa, if you could make your way to the center table there. Very good. Please identify yourself for the record and begin with...
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Brick, the Managing Director of the Arroyo Seco Foundation, and a long-time, 40-year DWP watcher. 28 of those years I was on the board of the Metropolitan Water District, including serving as chairman from 2006 to 2010. And that's really my main experience with the candidate that you are considering today, Marcy Edwards. When I was elected chairman, I got to appoint my vice chairs, and Marcy Edwards was the first one I went to. She was an outstanding vice chair. I think it's very important for you to know, in addition to all the great qualifications you're going to hear today from her family background, her personal experience at DWP, as well as her outside experience, that she also has a background in water, which is so important. All of the drought, the reality of this drought that we're in now really emphasizes the importance of water too. So Marcy Edwards is well versed in water. She was an outstanding leader at the Metropolitan Water District. She knows the utility industry well. She has a vision. She's tough and principled, and can really take on the challenges and the opportunities that DWP represents, truly making DWP a great utility that we can all be proud of. So I'm here today to enthusiastically recommend Marcy Edwards as General Manager of the Department of Water and Power.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm here today to speak...
Your name?
As the Bianco, my name's Jasmine Vargas. I'm here to speak today as the Bianco campaign organizer for the Sierra Club, and is a proud member of the Repower LA Coalition. And I would like to share a few words and also my hope with you all today for clean energy present here now, and climate action now. Climate change is one of the biggest problems facing the globe, and Los Angeles is particularly vulnerable for the hotter temperatures, devastating drought, and severe weather events associated with climate change. While LADWP took a big step forward by recently committing to a coal-free Los Angeles by 2025, much more is needed and needs to be done. And so the new GM should make mitigating climate change a top priority and present a concrete plan and timeline for how the city will become a leader on this issue nationwide. Energy efficiency is a critical part to this transition towards a 100% renewable energy Los Angeles. And we need more local solar and wind power to make that happen. The new GM should also commit to expanding the LADWP's energy efficiency targets and budgets so that we can reach the mayor's goal of 15% energy savings by 2020. With these solutions, we can exit coal without having to resort to other dirty fossil fuel options like natural gas. LADWP should also increase efforts to take advantage on the water energy nexus by finding ways to improve water efficiency while reducing energy use. As you all know, Los Angeles is the most diverse city of the country, and that diversity is reflected in the customer base of LADWP. So we need a GM that can offer different perspectives and frames of reference for this to be a leader at LADWP that is aligned more closely with and that mirrors the customers of LADWP and the users. Finally, I'd like to say that the overwhelming majority of Los Angeles supports leadership in climate action, and we hope that the GM could commit to that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barbosa?
Yes, thank you. Hi,
before you start your comments, if you can, Jordan Brandman and Dr. Tom Williams, if they can make their way to the center table. Ms. Barbosa.
Good afternoon. My name is Elsa Barbosa, and I'm the campaign director for SCOPE, Strategic Concepts in Organizing and Policy Education in South Los Angeles. And I'm just here to share with you that with your new leadership in City Hall, with the new leadership at LADWP, we just want to stress the importance of energy efficiency programs and making sure that we're investing in low-income communities of color, especially South Los Angeles. Because the energy efficiency programs really help struggling customers. In South LA, unemployment rates often exceed 20% and really get near 30% when you add in the underemployment rates. So there are three things about the energy efficiency programs that are really key, and you should know this, that the energy efficiency programs help the small businesses to keep their bills low. The energy efficiency programs help seniors who are on a fixed income and many families in South Los Angeles. So the programs around HYPE and SBDI, fantastic programs. And thirdly, what we really need to be paying attention to is jobs and pathways for South Los Angeles to have the opportunity for a good job. And the department, we really support the Innovative Utility Pre-Craft Training Program, which is really that pipeline into the jobs at the department when we're at a time where retirement is at 40% at the Department of Water and Power. So we just wanted to come here and say we're looking forward to working with you, looking forward to working with the new GM to ensure that South LA benefits and is part of the investment plan of the LADWP. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Fuentes and honorable members of the committee. My name is Jordan Bramman. I'm a member of the Anaheim City Council and previously served as Anaheim Public Utilities Board Chair. It is my pleasure to be here today and speak in favor of the confirmation of Ms. Marcy Edwards to be the next General Manager of DWP. I've had the privilege of knowing Ms. Edwards since being appointed to the Utilities Board in 2007, at which time she was the General Manager. When I arrived on the board, we were at the beginning phases of implementing the goals set out in AB 32, dealing with a dry water year and a summer season with very high temperatures. Throughout it all, Ms. Edwards and her team kept Anaheim moving forward. A challenge to her is an opportunity to problem solve for the greater good of taxpayers and ratepayers. When Ms. Edwards first came to Anaheim in 2001, the utility faced an ongoing operating deficit and issues with our key bargaining unit. She immediately laid out a plan to fix the budgetary issues, and within 4 fiscal years, it was as secure as can be. Furthermore, the utility's current relationship with labor could not be more respectful and understanding. Additionally, Anaheim has become fully compliant with state clean energy goals while also ensuring that financial impact to ratepayers is as mitigated as much as possible, and this was accomplished due to the stewardship of Ms. Edwards. It was this record of exemplary service that led the Anaheim City Council, when we were in search of a new city manager, to ask Ms. Edwards to take the job. This was not an easy decision for her because running a utility has always been of foremost importance to her. However, when Anaheim called, she did not hesitate. And because of her leadership, Anaheim is back on track and getting stronger every day. May I beg the committee for 30 more seconds?
30 more seconds.
Thank you, sir. So when she called and she said that she was under consideration for this job, I knew in my heart of hearts that she would be appointed because no one's better. I would ask for you to consider this when you're making your determination. She is a loyal, progressive problem solver, and you could not have a more accomplished appointee before you. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Williams.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, DWP Liaison. Can't we do better? This is a city of 4 million people. This is an organization that has $7 billion of revenue a year. This is an organization that has 10,000 employees, but there's no organization chart. There's not much in here. We can't even figure out where $40 million goes. Okay, it's only a few $1 million. But is she the right person? 10,000 employees. How many does Anaheim City have? Can't we do better? However, we did better on the last one. However, he couldn't even control it. So basically, can't we do better? This is a big city, has big problems. The drought, the D word, is here. We're looking at rates. We're looking at, it's only a 300-year replacement cycle on the water pipes. Because why? We're too big and it's not organized so that anyone can control it, much less a person who's worked on the inside. That may not be an advantage. A person that has worked with a smaller organization, that's not an advantage. So I hope her determination, if she's approved, will be sufficient to overcome 10,000 employees with legacies that we do not even consider. Thank you.
Meredith Hackelman and Millie Mason Moore, please. Please begin.
Hi, my name's Meredith Hackelman, and I work at the Metabolic Studio. And I just came as a concerned citizen to speak to the new general manager she's brought in, and to you, to talk about how we can do better with water and energy, putting solar panels in LA on our roofs, creating jobs, capturing every drop of water we can, recycling water, and also to invite you to go to Owens Valley to meet the people who live there and see the situation that's going on up there. So that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next.
My name is Millie Mason Moore. I'm also from the Metabolic Studio. We're located in between Chinatown and Lincoln Heights. We are currently seeking alternatives on how to capture water on our rooftop. We're also teaching out of the Metabolic Studio Urban Agriculture, and we're going to have a conversation with communities regarding the water wheel that Lauren Bond is currently going to implement in the LA River. And so we would love to encourage you guys to attend our March 22nd salon, and we will let you guys know when and where that will be. Thank you for listening.
Very good. Thank you so much. That concludes public comment. Ms. Edwards, if you'd like to please.
Mr. Chair, I just had one thing to the note
sir.
there. The young lady from Watts, I think, is that correct, your organization? Is that correct?
She's with
Scope?
Scope.
Okay. And I know Joe Buscaino, just for the record and for you to take this down, there's a DWP yard, I believe, at 103rd and Central. Is that right, Eric? Right about there, there's a pole climbing yard. I want a big sign. Joe wants a big sign. DWP have jobs for you if you train, okay? Would you look at that? It was a real good point, and I know Mr. Buscaino is really about that. Where's our service yards where the public could see it? We want to get jobs for people who are in Los Angeles and live in the area, and it's a great opportunity. I just wanted to get that on the record.
I think that's important.
Okay.
It's all about jobs, making sure that we have reliability. Ms. Edwards, come on up, because we're going to talk about job creation, reliability, all sorts of good stuff. Thank you, Mr. LaBonge, for starting there. Ms. Edwards, would you like to open up, and then we'll go ahead and have my colleagues here ask you some questions. By the way, thank you, colleagues, for being in attendance. I know it's difficult, but this clearly is one of the more important decisions that this committee will have to make in the near term, and would love to offer you the floor, and then we'll get into a conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is certainly an exciting opportunity for
If you
me.
could pull up the mic just a little bit so we can make sure that we all hear you.
How's that? Better?
Thank you.
Certainly a very exciting opportunity for me. As many of you know who have either heard the nomination or looked at my resume, I actually did 24 years at DWP earlier and have spent the last 13 in the city of Anaheim as their general manager as well as city manager. It's been a very exciting time. I am looking forward to the opportunity to be able to bring, I hope, a diverse skill set back to DWP. I have, as has been noted, some of the benefits of an insider, but I also have the benefits of an outsider. And I think that's fairly additive to the situation. LA is a premier organization, the largest and easily the most visionary utility in the nation, and if not, large portions of the world. They need to maintain a leadership position, and to do that requires a focus on not only innovation, but a willingness to be more risk tolerant, to allow new ideas to flourish, to pilot more. The incipient bureaucracy associated with any large agency over time has a tendency to squeeze out that kind of thinking and that kind of thought. And that's what we're going to need. There'll be more change in the next 10 years than I think you've seen in the utility industry in the last 30 to 50 years. Technology is expanding at the speed of light. There will be technologies that are out of date before we even get them even partially installed. And utility will need to change the way it does business to accommodate those differing drivers, but at the same time still serve reliable water and power cost effectively and lead the way in the areas of, and you've heard it all over and over again, climate change, jobs, the things that are important to the citizens of Los Angeles. And with that, sir, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Very good. I'll go ahead and open it up to my colleagues first. Members, any questions? Mr. My seatmate, Mr. Weezer.
Your seatmate and my previous policy mate, Mr. Corrett, sits on the other side from the now. But anyway, thank you. Welcome. I wish I would have had the opportunity to sit down with you before this meeting, which is usually pretty much the protocol where new general managers are introduced to council members before the public forum, get a sense of, background and all that good stuff. Unfortunately, I was told that, which is something that's never been done since I've been here, which is I was told that we may break the Brown Act if you meet with us, and but I just want to set it for the record that there's nothing wrong with general managers meeting with council members beforehand, and we're breaking no laws as long as you don't ask for our vote to vote for you. That's a serial meeting. That's the law. So as long as you could sit down if you ever come for another position to be general manager. This is not on you. This is what we were told. As long as you don't ask for a vote, we're not breaking any Brown Act rules. Anyway, I thought it was kind of awkward that happened. But nonetheless, here we are. And I have a huge interest in this issue, given that I was a previous chair of the Energy and Environment Committee. And I think our current chair, Mr. Fuentes, is doing a tremendous job bringing his knowledge and experience, having chaired a similar committee up in the legislature for some time as well. And I just want to get a sense of your views on some of the issues that have been on the agenda of this committee for some time. And first and foremost is, we, the voters, adopted a position for a new ratepayer advocate. And when I was chair of this committee, and Mr. Fuentes is doing a tremendous job of this as well, is to ensure that we are fulfilling the spirit of when the voters wanted to ensure that we had this position by having the ratepayer advocate have whatever information, data, et cetera, to make an independent analysis of what we're proposing. Initially, there was some back and forth as to what information would be available, and I just want to hear your thoughts on, and if you've ever had experience working with a ratepayer advocate anywhere in your previous jobs, how do you feel about working with a ratepayer advocate, and how do you see his or her position? Right now it happens to be a he.
Actually, sir, I'm very comfortable. I think that function, particularly the fact that it was created on an independent basis, is actually very valuable. It actually provides a level of leverage internal to the organization. Transparency is absolutely critical as a means of even starting to establish any credibility. And so the role of the ratepayer advocate is to help structure the type of information, and I can see nothing problematic really about that. I actually have a lot of my friends. I worked up at the California Independent System Operator for a brief while, and I have a couple of friends in the Office of Ratepayer Advocates, and they went on to be PUC directors, and we spent a lot of time talking about their role. In fact, one of Dr. Pickle's assistants right now, Camden Collins, and I were both governors at the ISO board together, so we go back quite a ways. I'm very interested in facilitating their work. I think it can only make us better.
And we've also been focusing on moving towards more alternative sources of energy. The last year we contracted to have two of the largest solar panel sources out near Nevada. And one of the things that I was hoping the city and DWP can move more towards is not only take advantage of that, but also to provide some economic development activity that goes along with that. For example, if we are going to purchase a number of new solar panels, why not have them made in Los Angeles or assembled in Los Angeles, I guess. When we are looking at invigorating our manufacturing sectors of the city and those areas that need additional economic development activity, and we're a huge purchaser of these types of this type of power, why not couple that with additional economic development activity? Anything in your background that you worked on like this that could shed light on your thoughts on this type of proposal?
That type of synergistic coupling is one of the reasons that you want to own a municipal utility.
Yeah.
Is it enables you to be able to add that additional tool to the economic development activities. In Anaheim, and certainly again on a smaller scale, the utility plays a significant role in the economic development activities. We work in concert with our chamber, with a number of local organizations. Our focus is not simply on the provision of renewable energy or on reliability, but on the provision of jobs, on the ability of increasing the tax base. On those are the reasons why you want to have one, is so that you can refocus that dividend back into value for the citizens. Whereas in an investor-owned utility, as valuable as they are, that dividend goes to stockholders. When you own a municipal utility, that dividend should then be reinvested, and you're speaking to exactly the areas that it needs to go, which is job creation. Anytime you do anything like that, it's a benefit. So I've done quite a bit in terms of variety of solar programs, initiatives, demonstration plants. I've done a lot of improvements on existing facilities, city facilities. I take a park that was in a blighted area that's underused, and as a demonstration facility, we put in artificial turf and created ball fields. Or we put solar roofs over playground materials, or we went into schools and we worked with them to install lunch shelter solar systems and provide shade. So it's the double bang for the buck that you need to look at in all of these.
Good. Thank you. And finally, one thing that I'm proud of that DWP did in its last budget is that it increased its budget for energy efficiency programs, the highest level it's been. A lot of that was due to the advocacy of a number of organizations who brought to our attention, and long term, obviously, we will have much more savings with the investment we do up front. And what are your experiences in Anaheim that you might want to share with us on energy efficiency, and how do you view this as we hopefully will continue to increase the funding for energy efficiency programs here?
Energy efficiency is probably one of the least expensive, most long-standing benefits as far as an investment is concerned. It has a tendency to reduce demand on a sustainable basis as opposed to an intermittent one. The benefits can be spread in a diverse fashion geographically so that everyone can have some advantage to that. The benefits can be aggregated in a sense. It could be bid into external markets or used to offload the current portfolio and facilitate a greater shift away from coal. We've done a variety of programs in Anaheim with energy efficiency, but we've set some pretty significant targets because it is a tremendous value add, and it doesn't have the same, it has a lesser risk in terms of becoming technologically flat. I mean, if you put in a new energy efficient refrigerator or other appliances, that's going to be a benefit to that homeowner for not just 6 months or 8 months or till the next great thing comes out. You're going to get a good 5 to 10 year bang for the buck out of that. So it's well worth the investment, I think.
And another dividend we could have with this is focusing on low-income areas. That we know the benefits of energy efficiency for environmental reasons, but when we could help or assist low-income areas or low-income people, that's even a dividend, as you have termed it as well. So
one of the things we did in the utility is in conjunction with redevelopment, albeit redevelopment has gone through some significant change in the last year or two, but we worked in concert as they were redeveloping some properties. The utility would go in and put in energy efficient appliances at a certain income level. And We got enormous benefit from the utility as well as the societal benefit. We also bought from local suppliers. We got the job development benefit, the tax-based benefit. The whole idea is trying to look, when you're blending all these competing points of view, you have to try to also blend all the beneficiaries and get as much out of these actions as you can.
Great, thank you. And finally, I was excited to hear you're coming from Anaheim because Anaheim has a special place in my heart. The ranch area, rural area that I come from in Mexico, that I was born, this little central area in middle Mexico, the mountains. For some reason, a majority of us have settled in Anaheim. There's a little population there that I don't know how they got there, but they're there. So anyway, it reminds me of home. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly miss the fact that Ron Nichols has left. I miss him because he did a great job, and my only disappointment with him was that he left.
That he left.
So I've only heard good things about you. I'm very excited about you being willing to take on this job. You know it's tough, and you know you'll get a certain amount of abuse even for things that you have nothing to do with. Have you looked at all that, and how long are you planning on sticking around?
Well, I'm at quite a young age now, sir, so I have a few more good years left in me. I plan on...
I'm not talking about on this earth, I'm talking about in the job.
I do plan on this being my last job. As has been mentioned, I was born and raised in this company when I was young, and with the 24 years there and the 13 there, I know that should really make me about 32 if I do the math correctly, but I'm planning on being around for a while. I'm fairly resilient. If I have to offer one managerial strength, is that I'm okay with getting knocked down, but I pretty consistently get back up.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. So we're looking forward to having you. One observation, mostly from a distance, of DWP over the many years, although I think getting better recently, is that it's tended to be reactive, and a lot of the better things it's done over the years haven't been because they wanted to, but because the state mandated it, the federal government mandated it. Do you think you can continue pushing DWP to be a more proactive organization in terms of sustainability and environmental leadership, and maybe have us driving state and federal policies rather than just reacting to them?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and I will share why, because a lot of the members in this room contribute to that. There is a synergy and a commonality of thought that extends from some of the very innovative people inside the department up through the Board of Water and Power Commissioners, through the Mayor's office, to the people sitting here in this horseshoe. I think that's going to allow for much more movement than you have seen historically. It's that splintered effect in the bureaucracy that puts all the sea anchors out. And so, you end up in a situation where, as you said, you end up being forced to adopt it only because it's state law. It's the burning platform mentality. Only when it burns down to the point where you have to burn up or jump in the water do you finally do something. Bureaucracies are structured like that. My hope is that I can activate this one using the strength of the members. I have met a number of them, as I have now been corrected by the member. I wish I would have been able to meet them all, but this is a very solid group, and I like the leadership. I think they're all very well intended, and that's what you need. I think there's a lot of room for change, and I don't mind being on the leading edge. What you will see me do in a lot of instances is I'll pilot it. I'll put it out there. I'll see who are the detractors and who are the supporters and what mitigations can we do, and I will grow it from there. A lot of times the challenge in these larger agencies is they start out with such a bang and there are so many unforeseen consequences that people become kind of shell-shocked and they just don't get out there anymore. So I think there's certainly a lot of potential with the people I've met to be able to do just that.
Okay. And obviously you're aware that we made the historic decision to get our power plants off coal. There was somewhat of a push to switch the IPP coal plant to natural gas, and we delayed that till 2020, largely so we have a chance to evaluate newer technologies and hopefully not go to a better but still not entirely environmentally friendly option. What do you think about natural gas as a long-term option for the city?
First of all, let me make a quick observation. The exit strategy for Intermountain Power is on Anaheim's agenda this upcoming Tuesday. And I intentionally am not recommending to my council that we agree at this juncture to invest in a gas plant, specifically for the reasons that you just outlined. There are always going to be advantages to any consistent, predictable fuel source, but you need to use it more as a hedge and a reliability tool. Now, DWP is large, and it's going to have a need to have some predictable transitional fuel base in order for it to continue moving as rapidly toward renewables as it is. But you mentioned it, that technological trend is so steep right now that the opportunities that are going to be available now, I don't even think all of us really have an idea. Part of it is preparing the machine to be able to be agile and to accept those new technologies and to develop them, rather than think of everything on a 30-year time frame. And this is heretical, by the way, for a utility perspective, because we always think in 30-year time frames. But you can't anymore. It's like saying you're going to use your cell phone for the next 30 years. It's just not going to happen. So I think gas has a role, but I don't think it's going to end up being the mainstays. It also has a lot of volatility. I mean, I've seen gas go from $6 an MMBtu to 60 in less than a month. It's difficult necessarily to hedge. I think a diversified renewable portfolio, particularly with some emphasis on those that are sustainable, so you can manage baseload, so you can manage the intermittency, or the application of technologies in conjunction with the renewables that give you that ability to manage the intermittent issues, I think is where this is going. And frankly, I think a lot of it's going to go on a distributed basis.
And just one last comment. I was glad to hear you mention efficiency, because from my point of view, and I've been saying this at every opportunity, the least environmentally impactful and least expensive unit of water or electricity is that which you don't have to obtain. So I've encouraged that we spend every dollar we possibly can, as long as we're doing it wisely, on conservation measures, both on the water side and the electricity side. And that's it.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. And thank you very much. I was fortunate enough to have a good conversation with you beforehand and feel very good about your candidacy and where you're taking things, and that you're going to sort of continue the environmental perspective that the previous GM has put forward, and that we're moving toward. So that's very important to me and my constituents, and feel very good about that. I wanted to ask you a couple of things. One, offer you a chance here at this hearing to lay out a vision for 5 years, 10 years. If you would describe to us the DWP that you want to see in 5 years from now, how would you describe it? And that gives you, because part of this job, and we talked about this a little bit, I mean, there's the managerial side, and you've had some great experience in that, and then there's the vision and the aspirational side. And you've also had some good experience in that, and wanted to give you a chance, really on both ends, to give us, to lay out that vision, and maybe the other, and I'll fold in my last question to kind of put it all together, and the perception issue too. We've had a little bit of a problem lately with the nonprofit issue and how that's played out, and so maybe it's a separate question than the vision question, but how do you plan on improving the perception and the accountability for the public, which is important all over the city, particularly in the San Fernando Valley, where the perception, unfortunately, is less than stellar at the moment.
The vision question is an interesting one in that I touched on it earlier. I think the broader issues everyone's in strong agreement on, the transition to renewable portfolios, but part of this will need to be able to hold the optionality open so that as technology evolves, we're creating a framework, but we can still make the technological leaps. And in fact, to overcome some of the challenges that are even here present, it's going to take technology. That the linear focus on rehabbing the system, on changing the portfolio, and I know it's the utility mindset to structure it out and then spread the debt over X amount of years, but I don't think it's going to serve us well into the future. Trying to create a system of this particular small branch of government that is flexible and responsive and is more a coordinator in the sense of, we'll take the portfolio, distributed generation. Honestly, I think ultimately that's where we're going to end up. I don't know the way in which that's going to take off, but I have a strong intention that that's going to be it. It's going to be a renewable technology. There'll be some form of storage. There'll still be an inner working grid network, because you need the strength and the weight of that network to support those distributed options. But the department needs to be more of a facilitator of moving the technology, of being a leader in those areas. And we need to figure out how to transition out of the current long-standing models, both in terms of how we do business. I don't know for a fact if some of the continued investments in the broader grid are appropriate, or if we would get more bang for the buck in terms of bolstering up our internal supplies and lessening our need to be able to rehab and expand some of those grids. The network, interconnected networks have their advantage, but I think it's all going to be about LA and trying to create the systems where we can make change. We can pilot programs. Right now, there's such an investment behind you get a certain program going and you can see these 5 tweaks would better it by 30%, but it's all locked down. We need to be able to tack. We know we want to go over here, but and I realize it's the Queen Mary, and people have made the analogy that in Anaheim, I'm in a yacht, okay, and I can make turns faster, and I can also overturn a lot quicker. So, our hedging strategies are different. LA has benefit of a tremendous amount of, this be the only time you hear me say this positively, inertia. You have a lot of inertia and weight in your system. You can afford to take more risks with technology, more risks in trying out everything from microclimates. I did a pilot project a couple of years ago where I coupled a battery installation with a set of solar cells, and the pilot was I was trying to manage the communication technology such that I could remotely signal the batteries to feed into the grid at a predetermined time. I did it when I knew it was going to fail because I was trying to figure out what was wrong with the system and what did we need potentially to do to make it better next time. There needs to be more culture of that. So I see a broad proliferation of renewables. I see a tremendous focus on decentralized operation where the DWP acts as more of a facilitator or a coordinator in support of those areas where it provides backbone service and reliability until those challenges also. We will reach a point in renewable and storage technology where people will be able to have their own backbone, their own backup, their security, and I think the entire nature of the business could potentially change. So we need to start really preparing for that. And the second question, I forgot.
It's about the perception and how we...
This one has been a thorny one. There's obviously a couple of perception-related issues. One is with the issues of transparency related to the training and safety institutes. I think the principles of those agencies were strong to try to collect all of the different efforts that were going on inside the department, try to create a more efficient response. I think the goal of that was appropriate. I am, to some extent, surprised by why it's still a story. I mean, I've worked in government in part my whole life, and we're used to living under a microscope. So I don't understand why it's still going on to the extent. I know the department's turned in all the information that they have. I hope we reach a point of resolution because I think to some extent it's a distraction from the good work because it does serve for people to question why are we still, why is that? I would rather have the information out and be trying to explain it than I would continue to read that in the paper. And the other will be the rollout, the customer information system, the billing system rollouts. believe that's on your agenda for later. Staff probably has a far more detailed explanation, but I will tell you I don't know to what extent it will take years to recover from the perception impacts and losses of something like this. Now, to some extent, it happens with every rollout of these systems in every utility that I have ever worked in. It never goes well. There's always some bounces. But this will be problematic, and for somebody like myself who's kind of vehemently pro-customer, to me, this is a very high-profile, immediate issue that we need to really focus resources and communication on and show some immediate wins. I know the mayor's office and a number of you that I have spoken with have made mention of the same, that we need to show some rapid improvement in fairly short order. I think that will help stem the tide, but it's going to take an enormous amount of work and outreach. We need to acknowledge the differences. You know, the valley in and of itself, and you and I spoke about this, their characteristics are very different. You know, I was born and raised there, and I know there's some weather variables, but the valley has a different characteristics and different densities, and there are a lot of things about the valley that need to be acknowledged and blended in with the rate structure and the program offerings that I think there's still room for that to be explored as well. And I think that will help, but I'm under no delusion that we're going to be able to repair some of these perception problems, you know, in really short order. It's going to be a long haul to fix this.
Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's three things that built this city: water and power, the Port of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles Airport, which is expanded and modernized. And water and power in its history, last year you celebrated the department, the great Centennial of the Aqueduct. Very important. I just wanted to state that because there's a fact that your agency is so important to the history of Los Angeles. And it's so important, too, because we have generation, transmission, and distribution. And I love three things: generation, transmission, and distribution. I don't want to break it off. I saw how powerful DWP was when the whole state was suffering, when Path 15 was backed up. It was Jamzilla and Carmageddon 2 and everything else, which is the power path up to Central State that eventually got fixed. So you got to keep the strength of DWP, which is real important. You got to fight for DWP. DWP is an important agency. And I do believe in my 38 or 39 years, whatever it's been, there's periods of times where there's bad things happen, and then you get criticized as a quarterback or a director of a symphony orchestra, out of tune, quarterback can't make a pass, whatever the case may be. You reliable, how many power outages in Los Angeles today? You know?
Oh, probably a couple small ones, I bet, but
Yeah.
nothing significant.
Right, and the water came, and we got to conserve the water. You got to tell the story, Marcy. You got great heritage. You know, to have your grandfather and your father work there, and you work there and rise up to such an important role that the Anaheim's, take you out there to Anaheim. Were the Angels happy with you in the building to get it?
Particularly, sir.
Okay, all right, good. We want to make sure the Dodgers are happy with you. Does anybody believe this? True, I heard this when I was a kid, that when they built Dodger Stadium, there was as much light in Dodger Stadium as the city of Seattle. Does anybody ever remember that? Am I that old that,
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Paul, you're going to get it. All right, I did want to make some points here. Getting back there. You have yards, especially in South Los Angeles. I want a sign up there, and Joe Buscaino wants a sign up there, that says there's opportunity with DWP. And the way you train your people are so important. So please look at that. And I think it is 103rd and Central. And you have a climbing pole. You have one at Washington and Flower, I think, at the corner run by Trade Tech. I want your hand out to help people. That's what's really important about DWP. Also on the civic groups, it's interesting as I look out and I see Connor and some of the veteranos of many, many years who've come to their... Interesting enough, commissions have constituencies. You have a big constituency. Work with the constituency, but work for the best interest of Los Angeles. And I'm sure your commission will get involved and interface with that, but your job is to move the team down the field and try to continue to provide reliable energy of a blended source. I also want to say, too, very successfully, if I make a suggestion, because Mr. Nichols, and I do want to compliment Mr. Nichols as Mr. Koretz did, and I don't think he got time, but we did have a Saturday session where all the neighborhood councils came to City Hall and had, civic engagement. open up the doors one Saturday at Water Power, invite all the neighborhood councils and neighborhood associations and the neighborhood chambers to come and learn about it. I met today with an official for the city because our bond writers are coming from New York, and they want to take them on a tour, okay, and they want to go to Disney Hall. I said, yeah, but before you go to Disney Hall, go to the first floor of the 111 North Hope Street and walk through the Mulholland Museum and look at the history, what brings the power and the development of Los Angeles. So I did want to mention that too, and all these little things I'm going to put in a note back to you as well. Technology is so true. I saw a documentary on Steve Jobs, and I'm thinking, okay, see how much change has went when Steve Jobs, and Apple, and just in this last 10 years, sorry he died young, but what's going to happen in 2090? How much change is going to be in that century? How much change in between? Unbelievable. I saw a meter reader today on Vine Street, and I asked him, hey, could you do this by a different method there? And then he gave me some answer, and I don't think he understood exactly what I meant, but he kept walking because he has to walk, so it was good. But technology, he was reading both power and water at the same time, which I think is a new phenomenon, right? But they were out there. But I think technology is such a key. And on the issue of civic education again, people don't know where the water comes from. People don't know any history that they should. People don't know where the power comes from. And sometimes on your brochures, I didn't bring my bill, but your little flyer has so many words it's too small to see. And I think if you just have bullet points and direct people to that and have it. When you were there and I were there, we had Public Power Week, where we brought people to our yards. And that was so important to do, and I hope you would do Public Power Week again and work with the council offices to bring people to the yards so that they learn about this and the dedicated work that those who are 40 feet up in the sky doing the work. Educate the public. Civic is so important there. I did mention generation, transmission, and distribution. I do want to mention on solar issues, if we had if I was the mayor today, which I'm not, so I'm not going to be, but I could say that now, but I will say this. All who are sitting in our homes in Los Angeles, I want you to put solar first on the libraries and schools and recreation buildings first, so their public dollar cost is reduced first before the public, because our park systems have to pay all the fees now, all the freight, and I know there's a way they're going to try to work out where you can lower it, but I think that's an objective, and where there's a new building, to have solar on there to provide it. I think it's real important. I know the mayor is interested in that as well because he wants to see every tax dollar maximized on that issue there. I wanted to mention that as well. And also a thing that I'm going to bring to the committee is DWP the last several years had severe traffic rules applied where you had to sit for 3 hours before you could work sometimes on some streets. And I want to see if we can alter that and get cooperation between DOT, where you may pay for traffic officers to direct traffic. The other day I was on San Vicente in your district, going back to my district, and DWP had to do the work, 3 lanes down to 1 lane. If there was a traffic officer there, the people wouldn't be so upset, and it may be a little safer, and I think you should budget that into that on the big major streets. And where you can, we've got to review the no construction during peak hours, because I hate to see people sit. And I think they get antsy too when they sit. They want to get out and do the work, but we got to come up with a traffic plan, and maybe that's better cooperation between DWP. And I didn't get to talk to the ratepayer advocate, who I greatly admire, but I do believe, this is just my thought, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him, so Fred, forgive me. I think the ratepayer advocate should live in the city of Los Angeles. I want them to get a DWP bill so they're able to articulate that. And there's one person who agrees with me, so I guess I don't get the votes. But I just want to say that, and Fred, I'm sorry I didn't get to tell you that. I didn't see you until you moved your head a minute ago. I was looking to see you. I just wanted to also say I'm on the Inyo County Water Board. Water Power does a tremendous job that they could speak of with that. It's tough. We got the water. Mono Lake and Owens Lake are terminal lakes. Terminal lakes means if water goes in, it's dead water. It's a phenomenon that we got this water, and now we need to use it wisely in ways that protects it, but also work with the people of Inyo County, where you do it many, many, many times. And one of the greatest things I saw at DWP, I took my family when I first got elected, and there was a parade in Independence, and there was the people who were protesting DWP at a Florida parade on a DWP truck that they loaned them so they could come up at the parade. Pancakes were good, but there's a spirit of cooperation. There's 18,000 people. If DWP did not own the land, is anyone here from Fresno, California? It could be Fresno, California, in the sense of the development. I love Fresno. The Bulldogs are a great team, but Inyo County is pristine because you own the land and you care for the land. So keep doing that. And lastly, most appreciably, if all goes well, Marcy, and I'm absolutely going to vote for you. I don't want you to sell anything off. Keep it together. Make it run right. But also thank you in the past when you were here, and hopefully in the future for all transfers back to the city of Los Angeles, which is in a sense your property tax, which I appreciate greatly, and we all should appreciate greatly, because you don't pay property tax, but a transfer is in essence that, unless some city attorney or CAO tells me otherwise. I thank you, my wife thanks you, and all the constituents of the 4th District thanks you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Labange.
All right. And I'll put this in a letter for you.
There you go. And if you could send it to the chair for the file, too, that would be good, Mr. Labange. Thank you for being here again, and thank you for beginning with what I think is really important and often lost when we talk about sort of the future of Los Angeles, and in particular the utility. You have helped, I think, the committee understand that you've got a vision for the future, and that vision isn't necessarily clear, because as you mentioned, the innovation sort of edge is so sharp that we really don't know what it's going to look like. But we've got pretty good senses as to what it may be, whether it's a distributive generation sort of model, whether we're moving away from sort of the grid as we know it. I think those are big unknowns. But I think part of our challenges to getting there is now. And I was really heartened by the fact that it seems to me that one of your management strengths is the ability to get back up. This utility, I think, sort of the environment that we're in, and I think I can speak for my colleagues and the city as a whole, is that we're down as it relates to the utility. I think there's a real concern about sort of the validity of the action, rightfully or wrongfully, of how the utility demonstrates itself to the users. And I, to be honest, feel that that's pretty unfair in a lot of regards. We have a tremendous asset that can be leveraged so much more than it currently is or is perceived to be leveraged, that we desperately need you to be successful. So help me understand what the first 6 months of your administration look like. What is it that we will sort of see in your management style or accomplishments? What metrics do you think that you'll be putting out to be able to measure success, so that when you come back and visit, you can tell us sort of here's what's been done. If and it's not to say that you're going to hit all the marks, because another element of your presentation that I admire an awful lot is that you welcome defeat, because we learn from those mistakes, but we won't be satisfied with failure. So the first 6 months, what do they look like?
I think from a pragmatic standpoint, a priority issue is trying to ensure that the phones get answered and accurate bills get out. And I know that may seem rudimentary in some respects, but it's the baseline measure of the customer-utility relationship. That's how they are engaging us. That has got to turn around, and it's got to turn around fairly rapidly. There are a number of people working on it. I think there are still more we can do, but that's going to be a priority for me. The next is I want to understand the current views as far as the transition away from coal. I want to understand the timing, how it impacts the resource base, how are they planning on making those adjustments. I want to see to what extent we are hedging against the fact that things could turn in very different directions than how we may want or desire them to. And I want to understand what's in play. I want to be able to reach out to the community and try to continue some of the great work Ron was doing. I found him to be a very credible, stabilizing, strong guy. And I want to make sure I do my best to hold up those relationships and keep all those channels coming in, because as you know, this is all a balancing act of competing interests and directions. And I want to work to some extent on morale, because as you mentioned, there are some tremendously bright, innovative, very dedicated people who work for that company. And I think it's the processes and the systems that have let them down and kept them from being successful. And I want to do what I can do in short order to understand what those are, get them prioritized, and see to what extent we can start making some positive changes. To the greater we can take the shackles off them, the faster you're going to see the balance of things happen. And that's where having some familiarity with the bureaucracy is helpful. You can have all the good ideas in the world at the top, but if you can't actualize them and you can't get people on board, then they're never going to get past being good ideas. So reaching out and mobilizing the workforce is critical. And I want to create a culture of bad news is okay. I don't need sunshine, up my skirt every other day. That's not useful. It's not helpful. I want to have real debates about what do we need to do and how do we need to do it. And then we're just going to decide and we're going to go. There's not going to be any kibitzing internal to the department. We're all going to get on the same page. Those may not seem very lofty, but trying to get back some level of credibility I don't look at them as ratepayers. I've always used customer owners because, in fact, that's, to me, what they are. But starting to recover with that, reaching out to the employees, getting morale stabilized, getting this billing system done, understanding the future of renewables, understanding what is it we need to be to start allowing for these variety of futures. How do you take a bureaucracy of this long-standing nature and teach it or help it learn to be flexible or agile? That's a challenge in and of itself. I know those may seem vague, but I will tell you there's a lot to be said for the fact I want to hear from the policymakers, I want to hear from the community, I want to hear from the constituency, I want to hear from the employees. Then we're going to prioritize. What are the top 5 to 10 things that are really critical outside of the ones that I just mentioned? And how much can we get done in the 4-month, 6-month, 8-month, year time frame? And by then, I think I'm going to have enough of a handle at that point and enough of a wherewithal to make things happen internally that then we can really start taking strides in some of the larger leadership positions that are far more risky that, frankly, I don't think anybody but LA's always had a leadership position. They're always going to maintain one, and they should. They should. The world looks to this city. And I want to be able to perpetuate that, but I want to make sure that I get the company up on all 4 tires, because right now there's some bumpy roads that they've been over and they're tired. So that's kind of the first 6 months.
Mr. Koretz, I see you wiggling. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I had one other issue, which I was
The new signal.
Anxious. Signal? I like that.
Anxious to flag for you, which is difficulty we've had with residential solar installation. We get complaints with some regularity in my district office about people who get their contractor out, they put up the solar, they get licensed very quickly by the city, and then DWP takes 2 or 3 months to turn it on. I don't know that there's any justification for that, but it seems to be a problem that has been difficult to solve. So I would just sort of flag that for you and encourage you to do whatever you can, because
I was told anecdotally that they think a significant portion of the backlog would be done by May, but I'm not conversant with the reasonings or basis for that. But I do know that it is a priority that they've been working on internally to cut that. We are anything if not fraught with process, and that's one of the big things we need to figure out is how do we cut those down so that we can facilitate those, because you're absolutely right.
And unfortunately, we turn cheerleaders for solar into people that are complaining to everybody about how they have this system and they can't get it turned on by DWP. So if we can turn that around, that would be great.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. So coming back to sort of the first 6 months, I don't think those are sort of vague goals. I think they're actually very, very important. They may not be completely sort of things that we can measure, but the one that rings sort of the loudest in my mind is the ability to make sure that we are touching our customers with the right information vis-a-vis that bill, in 6 months. I mean, to me, I know that sounds like a long time, but understanding sort of the scope and the challenges, and we have an item later on in the agenda that's going to speak to sort of how challenging this particular problem is. I think that's probably the single most important signal that we can send to our ratepayers, our customers, that we are actually in charge. I want to touch on something that Mr. Weezer alluded to. Mr. Weezer, Mr. Koretz didn't have the benefit of meeting you before this meeting, and I think that's unfortunate. And I would highly encourage you to make sure that going forward we have the most sort of interactive relationship possible with all of the policymakers, and he alluded to sort of your relationship and how you view the ratepayer advocate. I'd like to expand on that just a little bit more. What does your management style or team look like to be able to interface with this committee, the council, the ratepayer advocate, our constituents? We've talked a little bit about Ron, and it's not to say that we're looking for you to fill his shoes per se. It is to say that, at least in my experience, when I first was elected to the legislature, I was very surprised and excited by going to community presentations on rate hikes at the time and not seeing staff or consultants give the presentation, but the general manager of the utility pointing slide by slide to all of the different elements and literally taking all of the heat. I'm not saying that that's the expectation, but I think it's been a very good example of how important it is for us to communicate often with our constituents, the policymakers, your commission, the ratepayer advocate. How are you going to manage those, what I think are very critical relationships in the first couple of months?
Certainly, there's always the issue of, how can you clone yourself? And in a job like this, there's 40 places you need to be all at one time. You will find I prioritize probably more in the direction of customers because I am wired that way. I am the chief advocate in Anaheim for a variety of city issues, but certainly for all of those relating to the utility. And so I'm not uncomfortable with that. I will bet what happens inside DWP is fairly reflective of large bureaucracies. When the Office of Ratepayer Advocates wants information, the battle isn't over whether to give it to them. The battle is over what it is. And there are probably 14 different groups who are all arguing over the number because what that number is will reflect on them in some way, shape, or form. And there is no process for them to say, okay, there's 15 different interpretations. This is the one that's most valid. This is a benchmark we're going to use. This is the one that everybody's going to use. I have a real good idea inside of utilities what happens. So it appears frequently from the outside the search for information is almost impossible. It's mostly because they need somebody to decide, all right, we're done debating all the different interpretations it might be from finance, from IT, from water. This is the one we're going to use, and we'll defend this one. That's a lot of what I think will help bring the information out, because I'm pretty sure a lot of the wars are just over compilation. I have seen that over and over and over again in utilities, because if it's figured this way, that impacts that guy's budget or his perception of metrics or something else. And so that's almost always what it is. The Office of Ratepayer Advocates is very useful because they represent the policy body and the people, and they can be of a lot more assistance than they are problematic. I'm looking forward to working with them. They can help define those areas of measurement and quantification they see most valuable by a comparison with other agencies. I can help the utility work to find a consistent source and a common understanding of what those numbers are going to be, good or bad. And then we have a starting place, and then you can set a plan, and then you can try to work to it.
And I'm glad that you have that perspective, because I think that some of that due diligence has been, at least since the advent of the ratepayer and the charter change that we did, I think that there's a real recognition that more information is going to be very helpful in managing the utility. And as a result, in the last rate ordinance and the due diligence that was done to get the rate in place, there was a real emphasis and ultimately a council action to ask for benchmarking on a sector-by-sector basis so that we can have at least a better sense as to how it is that we compare and maybe tune in a way that we can actually be more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I think that for better or for worse, the city, the council, the commission, DWP, I don't know who specifically, we haven't moved quickly enough along those lines. And I think that this is more statement than question, so I thank you for your indulgence here. But I think that in order for us to be able to be successful in gaining back the support that we're going to need in order to ask ratepayers to pay a little bit more, to do all that we want to do, and to be, as you've said on several occasions, more agile and be able to be responsive to the future, we're going to have to really have a honest conversation, a real demonstration, number demonstration, metrics, benchmarking as to how we compare, and that we really are wringing out every single drop out of the towel, because only then do I feel confident to be able to go to ratepayers and say to them that I cast my vote in order to increase their rates. And for better or for worse, because of the politics associated with the utility, and I think a lot of that may, as you said, may be sort of unfair to everybody that's involved, in particular the workforce who's maintaining our water and lights on a daily basis. It's going to be absolutely critical that we have that done, because I don't know how myself or this committee can recommend that we move forward with a rate hike. And that's understanding that we probably need it. But I don't think there's a lot of confidence as to how much and by when. And so that is, I think, by far, I will say, your biggest challenge, because it really falls on you to be able to help us understand how to be credible again. So I think I will end there, because I have an awful lot that I want to talk to you about. I'm very confident that this won't be the last time that we converse from a committee perspective or on a member-to-member perspective. And unless anybody has any sort of closing thoughts or ideas, Mr. Huizar.
Thank you. And I just assumed this, but I just want to ask point blank, are you committed to get this utility off of coal by 2025?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just assumed it, but I just wanted to make sure we asked that. But
well, and colleagues, if I may, that's with all due respect to the candidate, that's for us to sort of instruct and help them understand what their mandate is. And
we've made that decision, and I just I kind of knew what your answer was. I just wanted to see how enthusiastic you were about it, and you're absolutely, I think, answered my question, because I think there's going to be some bumps along the road. And we just have to keep moving forward in that direction. And you're right, Mr. Fuentes, we've set that policy. It's a policy as policymakers. We've set that policy. We asked the utility to implement it. But I was mostly looking at how you answer it. And I think there are going to be some bumps, but we should not veer away from that and keep on that track, I think.
No, sir, I completely agree. I would like to respond to one comment, sir. So I'm a big one about intent. Even when you fail, if your intentions are good and your plans are well thought out and you had hedges, failure is simply a learning experience. And you talk about benchmarking. I will tell you what I'm going to do with benchmarking. Benchmarking will be the vehicle that I use to show why there are some of the costs and challenges in the delivery of certain services. And there will be information that comes out of that will not necessarily be what everybody wants to hear. But if you want to make change, then you need to understand these are the components, these are the things we have that are in control, these are things we should likely band together and work at improving. Right now, it's all blended together. The money goes in, a whole bunch of magic happens, and then maybe a pole gets put in the ground. Once you start to look at it, benchmarking will be as much, if not more useful to me than it will be to the policy body.
That's precisely what I wanted to hear. Colleagues, if there's no objection, I'd like to move this item to the full City Council on a unanimous vote. It's seconded by Mr. Blumenfield. Without any opposition, that measure is out. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Prieto, where does that take us?
Item number 2, Mr. Chair. Motion Fuentes Krekorian relative to Department of Water and Power and the CAO, reporting on the status of its revenue collection for the current fiscal year and projections for the remainder of the fiscal year and related matters.
No.
Very good. Please identify yourself for the committee.
I'm Phil Leiber. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Water and Power.
I'm Sharon Grove. I'm the Assistant General Manager of the Customer Service Division.
Campbell Hawkins, Director of Customer Operations.
Well, we are here today to respond, at least initially, to the council motion that was passed on February 4th, inquiring about the under-collection problem that we've experienced in connection with the go-live of our new customer information system. So we'd like to give you some answers to your questions, and we expect this will be the first of many meetings, but we hope to shed some light on this and give an indication that it is a problem we're well aware of. We have a good plan to solve it, and in the coming months we'll be closing this gap. So there has been some indication that we are experiencing a shortfall in collections across all the different services that this billing system is used for: water, power, sewer, and the various fees and taxes. By this time in the fiscal year, we had expected to collect about $3.4 billion in revenue. We've only collected $3.1 billion, so we have a shortfall of about $300 million. And that shortfall differs by service. Some services, such as water, are about on plan. Others, like power, we're experiencing a larger shortfall. So on water, we're about 3% under where we expected to be. On power, we're about 11%. Similarly, sewer is about 12.9% under. And some of the taxes that the city depends on, including utility users tax, those are also running short by about 6%. What is causing this? It's caused by two factors. One, the collections effort has been suspended at times over the past several months in connection with the go-live of the new system. For the first month or so after the go-live, in order to focus on getting the system up and running, not to overwhelm the call center. Some of the normal notices that go out in terms of your bill is late, those were suspended. It went live again for some period of time and then was stopped in late November. That has been one of the major contributors to this undercollection. The other is the challenge in getting the bills out. We don't want to send out inaccurate bills, so there's a process by which bills that appear to be problematic are set aside for additional review and processing. So that has contributed to the undercollection as well. And Campbell and Sharon are going to tell you more about those problems and what they're doing about it. What impact has this had on the utilities' finances? We, of course, would like to see our collections come in according to plan, but the fact that they haven't has not presented an overwhelming issue for the utility to date. We have balanced things out using two tools. One, our spending has been under our plan this year. Some of that has just been the normal process of things. We typically spend more later in the year than in earlier months. We've had some delays on some large capital projects. So overall, that has been a major factor that's allowed our cash position to be good overall. So on the power side, our spending is about $426 million under plan. On water, about $100 million under plan. So that's been more than sufficient to offset the revenue shortfall. Additionally, the utility does have very sufficient cash reserves for unforeseen circumstances such as this. So our cash balances are well in excess of our minimum targets currently, and that is expected to be the case throughout the course of the year. So those two elements have allowed the utility to weather the storm pretty well. There's also the question that was raised. The city is dependent on some funds that come from Department of Water and Power, the utility users tax and the power system transfer. On both of those, I think we're going to get these issues taken care of. Utility users tax, as I had mentioned, was running about 6% under plan. You're going to hear our action plan to close this gap, and we expect by the end of the fiscal year we'll have narrowed that to just 1% or 2%. With respect to the power system transfer, our board voted on the transfer for this fiscal year. Nothing that's happening with our billing system is going to impact that at all. We will send every dollar we committed to send this year. We expect the same will be true next year. Next year's transfer is based on this year's financial results, and for a variety of reasons, the delay in our cash flow is not going to affect the transfer. The transfer is based on the amount of revenues that we recognize in our financial statements based on the services that we deliver. The fact that the cash may lag somewhat will not affect the transfer. So that's, at a high level, the couple of points I wanted to cover. There was also an inquiry about the effect of these delays in spending on our capital projects. There are some delays, nothing that's going to present consequences in terms of meeting our mandates or getting ahead of the aging infrastructure. We're on track to meet our renewable resource requirements. Our mandates in the power system, such as once through cooling, that's a long-term project, goes all the way out through 2029. We do have some time to catch up. There have been some equipment deliveries that have run a little behind schedule, but nothing that jeopardizes those projects in any way. On the water side, similarly, Owens Lake Dust Control, that's a major project that's going to start this year. It's a few months behind, but in the next 4 months we expect to get back on track with that. Environmental projects like groundwater remediation, cleanup, conservation, water recycling have run a little slower than anticipated, but we expect in the next few months we'll be catching up. So overall, we've underspent our capital program, but in the coming months we think we'll make up a lot of ground.
And before I turn it over to other speakers, in the sort of, you mentioned at least 4 or 5 different categories where the capital programs are slowing down a little bit. To me, that intrinsically means that there's a cost to sort of get caught up, whether we have to double our efforts to get up to schedule or potentially additional costs because we're missing targets or goals. It sounds as if, from a regulatory perspective or mandate perspective, we're not missing any goals. But what is it that made it so that we slowed down in our capital expenditures? It can't, in my opinion, have been knowing that we're going to need larger reserves to make up for this. So what is it that is sort of slowing us down on all those different categories?
I think it's just a variety of factors. For example, on the Scattergood repowering project, there was some delay in getting in some very significant equipment from a vendor. Just the type of thing that you plan things out, but you do run into some unexpected delays. So that was one. With respect to the power reliability program, that's not a mandated program, but it's just something we have to get ahead of. There have been some large contracts for outside resources that we've run into some issues. We're trying to work through those. But overall, we will be back on track in the coming months.
And from your perspective, is there any additional cost to us as a result of being, I'll say, behind schedule in these different categories?
Not that I'm aware of. There are no fines and penalties that we're going to incur from missing mandates. And as for the programs that we just need to do of getting ahead of the aging infrastructure, of course these things can't wait forever. We do need to get ahead of it. But I don't think there are any significant direct costs we'll face from being a few months behind where we'd like to be.
Very good. Before we go to the ratepayer advocate, did you all want to add anything else?
I just wanted to mention at a very brief level, we're focusing in the customer service organization in 3 different areas: on resources, on our collections, and on our billing. And so we've got plans, and you can ask questions. I don't want to go in a lot of detail. We have plans around all 3 of those. They're actually already in play. We're partly done with bringing on new resources. We've turned on collections in an automated fashion. We've been doing it in a manual fashion. We've turned it on in an automated fashion. And the billing, we're continuing down a work-down plan that started 3 months ago. So we've got plans in place to address the things that Phil mentioned, and I'm willing and happy to take questions about those.
Very good. So I do have a couple of questions on that point, and I'll try to be brief on them because I want to hear from the ratepayer advocate and then open up to more questions. But we, this committee heard essentially this item with the billing sort of problems, and at the time it was more sort of the incorrect amounts being billed to customers, and it was primarily those customers in the residential area where we had a Rule 1, a Rule 2, and a Rule 3 causing sort of the most consternation amongst our ratepayers. It's my understanding now that we have some additional problems. It's not just the incorrect amount. In some categories, we're not even sending a bill out to commercial customers, or we haven't. Can you help me understand sort of how large of a problem it is now, and and if you can help the committee understand why it is that we're sort of learning that now versus when we initially felt the hiccup in the estimated bills. Is it something that just came to realization a couple weeks ago, or why is it that we have sort of a larger problem? And is there something else on the edge here that you anticipate may be a problem going forward?
Thank you for your question. We have quantified what we call the delayed bill issue, and when we started this delayed bill workdown plan, we had about 95,000 delayed bills. At the current date, we have 65,000 delayed bills. And so the way that we work these bills are across all the different sectors, the residential, the commercial, and the industrial, governmental sectors, and we work these delayed bills down. Right now, we're currently working them down based on bill amount. So you're absolutely right. We do have some bills that are older than the go-live date, which means some of these bills have been delayed, can have been delayed for up to a year. The majority of these bills are bills that we had an issue with because of the conversion of the new system, and so there are a significant portion of these bills that we're working through, and those bills will end up exceeding they'll be between 4 and 6 months delayed by the time we get them billed, and we're working on that right now. About half of this delayed bills amount are bills that have come in rather recently, and they're delayed. We count them delayed. I really want to make this clear. We count a delayed bill, the 65,000 delayed bill number, the minute it leaves the billing window. So we're trying to measure this from the customer's perspective. Again, in our quest to really be able to deliver appropriate service, we want to understand the pain the customers are feeling. So the day it leaves the billing window, we're counting it as delayed. So a lot of these numbers of bills haven't really been delayed a long amount of time. However, to your point, there are some bills in the commercial customer class that we have either failed to get a read on, or we've got some metering mismatch because it came from the old system, and the meter number there's some configuration issue in the new system, and so we touch every one of those bills manually to get them out the door the first time. Once we fix that, then it is fixed in the system and it will bill regularly. But you're absolutely right, we still have some bills that we're working through to get those cleaned up.
And I guess where I'm a little confused, so the residential, and correct me if I'm oversimplifying it, but it seemed as if when we originally heard of the problems, the residential customer was getting either a Rule 1, Rule 2, or Rule 3 estimation. Now, on the commercial side, it seems like some of our customers haven't even received a bill, so we didn't even estimate something, which has resulted in a huge undercollection. I mean, I think the statistic was about 80% of what's not being collected is attributed to those bills that are significantly delayed up to 4 months, as you said. Is that correct?
It's correct. What happens is there are some commercial customers that we can't bill them unless we have an actual read. And so in our efforts to get actual reads of those customers, until we get an actual read, we will not bill them. They're a rate class that can't be billed on an estimate. So we do have some larger commercial customers where we have to get an actual read before we bill that customer. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I guess it begs the following question. So a residential customer, we can estimate their bill.
Correct.
Default to Rule 3, be grossly out of whack, or at least that's the allegation by the customer, but when it comes to a commercial customer, we can't estimate, and so we don't bill. There seems to be something there that we probably should analyze at some point in the future in terms of a policy. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go to the ratepayer advocate, and then we'll open it up for some more questions, because I'm sure there's plenty. Dr. Pickle.
DWP has been working carefully with us and disclosing this information to us over the last few months. We first became interested in this issue when there were concerns about bill estimation, and we were wondering if there was an aggregate over-collection revenue. But we quickly discovered the problem was probably the other way. And we support everything Mr. Leiber had to say, but there are two other things to be concerned about in this process. One is a lot of these estimates are appropriately done versus a forecast of what we thought we would be getting at this point in the year. If you compare some of these estimates to what the prior year was, and there are always questions about adjustments for weather, revenue, at least as the end of December, was a little bit ahead. the prior year. And if you look at the total energy supplied to all customers, this is not measured at the customer meter, but at the wholesale level in terms of power flowing into the region and the amount used by other utilities. It's called net energy for load. Net energy for load, if compared to the prior year, is down 4%. And the question is that weather, or is that a decline in sales due to better conservation, more rooftop solar, or maybe the economy isn't moving up as fast as we think? So this will bear monitoring. The things we have to fix are related to the billing system. What we can't fix immediately is weather or the economy, but we do need to monitor that to understand what's going on.
And I think those are very important points because I see them as sort of two fundamental issues here. You know, are we sort of where we're supposed to be, meaning forecasting, and how soon before we are where we need to be, which is getting bills to all of our customers, which is where we're not, if that makes any sense. I think I'll open up to questions. I do have some more of my own, but I will go with Mr. Blumenfield first.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the presentation and feel assured about the city transfer fee. I was worried about that question. Is there, it just strikes me, is there a legal liability that's floating out there that we haven't heard about in terms of commercial folks not getting their bill and then suing us later for, false expectations or also being on the budget committee as well, seeing the lawsuits that come every week, it just kind of a little fear bubble popped up, thinking, oh God, here we go again. There's going to be a huge class action lawsuit. Is there been any talk of that or concerns?
No, one thing I will mention that the services have been rendered, so the electricity has been used and the water has been used. However, I do think it's very important to note that we feel very responsible and accountable for delaying this customer's bill. So we work very closely. The process right now is when we do finally render the bill and it's over 99 days old, we proactively call the customer before they receive the bill. We ask them if they would like payment arrangements, and we help work with them to make appropriate payment arrangements for their situation. So we're doing a lot of things to really manage the burden the customer has with getting a multi-period bill.
And the interest, they're not being charged interest during that time frame?
There's no, the receivables are new effective the date of the bill.
So that's the other question. I mean, when we're dealing with such a large amount, how much are we losing in terms of just the float, in terms of the interest, and is it even significant? But it seems like it could be.
There would be some cost of money that one could calculate. It wouldn't be a large number in this environment, and we don't have explicit working capital loans outstanding that we've had to go out and take because of this. So I would say there hasn't really been a direct cost. Our cash positions, again, are healthy, and we're not, frankly, earning a whole lot on that cash. So the fact that we're down some, there's not a large direct cost to that.
Yeah, on that point, I guess I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that. So if I am a commercial customer and I receive my bill and I don't pay it for 90 days, am I charged a penalty fee or interest on that amount that I didn't pay when I should have?
Yes.
And so if I'm now the utility and I'm not sending bills out for 4 months, as a utility, I'm losing the opportunity. Well, it's not a loss of an opportunity. If I had billed things correctly, I would presumably be getting my share of the revenues, but if folks didn't pay, there's a certain population there that would have been late, and that's money that we're losing. And so the total that is out there in terms of under collections was how much on the electrical side?
On electric, we're at about $223 million, and the total under collections about $313.
$313 million. So it feels as if we're losing. There's a value there that's being lost, and I don't know how we would be able to tell because we never presented the customer with a bill. I shouldn't say never. There's a universe of customers who have not received our bill as a reason, right?
If I may, though, that amount is a significant portion of that amount are bills that have been sent to customers and they haven't paid them. So there's a much smaller amount in that total that are directly related to not having yet rendered the bill. Right now, I think we're sitting at approximately between 120 million with that, and the remaining are customers that we are collecting late payment charges on because they have past due balances that they haven't paid.
Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, my only question is, since we have screwed some of this up and we anticipate people could be angry, could sue because they're angry, etc., are we doing much to apologize to them? Because I think we probably in the process actually should very explicitly apologize for this rollout not working out as planned and the lengthy time between billing and all the problems that occurred. So have we thought about the need to do that and the fact that that kind of goodwill generating effort might reduce the number of complaints and lawsuits, etc.?
I will explicitly state it now that I'm sorry that it's happened. I think we have put customers, and some customers have some burden of getting these multiple period bills, and I think that's a really good suggestion. And I think there's some customer outreach that should happen, so thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pickles?
We'd encourage the department to have an ongoing proactive communication on this, including expected schedules for resolution of some of these problems so the customers know how long this might take and how long it might be before they're individually caught up.
Colleagues, any? Mr. LaBonge?
No, I just hear from people, and it's disappointing, but you got to fix it. And the sooner you fix it, the better it is. And you may want to spend a few dollars telling the public, that what you're doing. And because they get disappointed on this now. Now you're going beyond the people at this meeting, the neighborhood people. You're getting to the people who have take you for granted, as I do. But now when they see this, it's upset. So
let me come back to sort of the capital projects and where we are on the schedule, not on schedule, but on the schedule. And presumably the money that was allocated to do some of this, do the maintenance and the operational needs for the utility, my assumption is that a lot of that comes from the rate hike that was recently done in 2011. Is that when it was approved, the last one?
Fall of 2012.
Fall of 2012. And so in just sort of my thinking, there's, additional revenue that's available as a result of that rate hike, and presumably that is intended for capital projects. And since we're underspending, does that then push out the need for a rate hike into some amount into the future?
In a sense, it does. The money for our capital projects comes from two sources. It comes directly from ratepayer collections in the current year, and it also comes from bond offerings. And to the extent the money is spent more slowly than planned, the money is available in the next period, so we borrow less. So it all gets taken into account. So we have more money on hand this year. It means the amount of money we'll need to borrow next year shrinks. It would kind of result in lower rates next year. So it all is all taken into account and adjusted.
And on that point, before I let Dr. Pickle sort of chime in here, from an operational and maintenance perspective, so that's sort of the financial aspect of that, but from an operational and maintenance perspective, are we, I mentioned it in terms of cost before, but I'm just thinking from an operational perspective, what does that mean on a day-to-day basis for our infrastructure? I mean, is it that much more likely that we're going to have problems out in the field because we're behind, or is this sort of underspending is such a small, negligible amount of time that you all don't think from an operational perspective that it's a problem at this point?
I think it would be the latter. We're talking about months of delay here. We're not talking about years. We are behind on keeping our infrastructure up to date, so it is a longer-term problem that has to be addressed, but a few months isn't going to make a critical difference.
Dr. Pickle, did you want to, on that note?
We often point to mandates causing problems, but the biggest spending increment is the Power Reliability Program. And that's not a mandate, that's the charter to provide reliable service. And to the extent we're supporting providing reliable service and that was used for one of the justifications for the rate increase. We need to move ahead with that to provide reliability for our customers.
So Mr. Blumenfield mentioned the power revenue transfer, and that bill, so to speak, doesn't come due until the end of the fiscal year for you all to transfer to the city of Los Angeles?
Those calculations are done essentially 1 year in arrear. So next December, our board will vote on the transfer that is based on this year's fiscal results.
Got it. So we have time, as you mentioned in your presentation. Now, with respect to the utility users tax, so that is a here and now contribution to the city of Los Angeles. And so my concern is that presents potentially a cash flow problem for Los Angeles. We're talking $20-30 million of delay. Does that have an impact? Well, first of all, will it be delayed to the city of Los Angeles?
That one could potentially be a bit more problematic, but the magnitude of the shortfall we think will be shrinking as this action plan on collections is put into place. So presently it's about $12 million under expectation, and with this action plan we think that could shrink to just a few million by the end of the year. Sure. But there too, it's a matter of the money will come. It's just it could be delayed a few months.
And the when is important, which is why cash flow is important too. So at this point, it's $12 million worth of delay?
Correct, out of about 300 and some million of expected. So again, by the end of the fiscal year, we think that could be down into the low single digits. So a very small variance we hope and expect.
Okay. And not to sort of get into the gory details of the action plan, just give us some milestones, because again, the last time we all visited, our assumption was that it was mostly, at least my assumption was that it was mostly sort of on the residential side of things. When is it fixed? And an estimate is fine, because I understand that this is not sort of hard and fast, and we're learning that there's problems. But to the best of your ability, when do we think we have a conclusion in sort of solving all of these problems, and what are the 2 or 3 milestones before that, so we have a better sense for when we can say with certainty that we've got it all under control?
Sure. We've laid out a forecast based upon 2 drivers that Phil had alluded to earlier, both the collection as well as working the delayed bill plan. When we look at feathering in collections over the coming weeks, as well as working the delayed bill plan, and not considering any other lift that we believe we'll get just by being back in the market with collections, so to speak, we are projecting, and it's a conservative estimate by design. We anticipate bringing in $200 million worth of revenue over by the end of June.
Okay, so closer to the end of the fiscal year?
Yes.
And so does that get us caught up at that point, do you think?
I'll let Phil answer that.
That would close about 60+% of the gap. So it won't all be solved by the end of the fiscal year, but probably about 2/3 of it, according to this plan. And we're continuing to refine this. We really are going to focus on getting the high value accounts dealt with first, prioritize getting the larger dollars in first. So we're going to continue to refine the plan, but based on what we have at the moment, we think we can get about 60% of the gap closed by year end.
Councilmember Fuentes, I just wanted to let you know this is a very conservative plan. We don't want to go out there with a number and then not reach the number. So I really want to assure you that we've been very, very careful with these estimates.
And I appreciate that. And so in fairness, I think it's important for you all to sort of let us know what it is that we can do to be helpful here, because as we talked about privately, and I'm very excited, Mr. Koretz, that as chair of the Personnel Committee, you're on this committee as well. Are there things that we can be doing to help facilitate either a solution on a more permanent basis to get caught up or avoid these types of sort of collection issues? Because as you all have said, you're feathering the throttle on when we're collecting and when we're not, because we're overloading our customer service capabilities, and that results in more frustration and problems. So what will you all be asking of us in the near future so that we can begin to contemplate how we can help here?
Well, we want to assure customers that as we proceed into fully automated collections, we're going to be very careful to continue to watch the service level we're providing in the call center. So we ask for your understanding as we continue to work through that meeting of the collections and the call center. The other thing we would really ask the personnel committee, any help you can give us in keeping these lists always active and never having lists inactive in these operational areas would be very helpful. We have been living with an inactive list for our meter readers and our customer service representatives since May of 2013, and that has put a significant burden on really trying to react quickly. We have been able to do some emergency appointments, but again, that's not the most optimal way to onboard additional resources. So anything we could do to continue to expedite the process of keeping these civil service lists active would be really very helpful to us.
Very good. Well, Mr. Kretz, I would like to work with you on that issue because I think if there's something that we can be doing to help, and I know that having a general manager is imminent, and we'll let her sort of decide what is important here. But if we need to be acting to be able to move additional resources to make it so that it's not the fiscal year, but sooner than later resolving these billing problems, I think we'd all be well served by that. I know that in the coming month, the department is required to submit its proposed 2014-2015 budget to the council and the committee for informational purposes. Do you think at that time you'll have a better sense as to whether your conservative action plan is working and have a better update for us?
We have actually put into our 14-15 budget an effort to not only continue to improve operations, but to ask for the ability to bring on supplemental resources both in the field workforce and in the call center workforce. And so we have added funding to our budget, and I know that the water system and the power system have been very understanding and very collaborative in helping us drive that budget target.
Very good. If none of you have anything to add and my colleagues don't have anything to say here, I would like to continue the matter for 30 days and request that the DWP form a departmental response team to address the billing revenue collection matter, and members of that team to include DWP, the CAO, the CLA, Bureau of Sanitation, since a big portion of their bill is also being delayed here, personnel, and the ratepayer advocate. And this team should meet weekly, or as best convenient for everybody involved, to report on its progress to address this revenue billing situation, because I feel that we need to have, I think, more real-time information as we go, because, last year in November, whenever we heard the item, it felt like there was a plan and there was a good presentation, but since then we've learned that there's more challenges with the system, and it just feels like it's getting away from us. And I know that you all have a plan, but I don't think that we can afford for it to get any further than it has. I mean, literally can't afford for it to get any further than it has. So I absolutely appreciate your time. We'll continue the item, and thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Prieto, item number 3.
Item number 3. Motion Fuentes Bloomfield Labange relative requesting and instructing Department of Water and Power and Bureau of Sanitation to report on a variety of state legislative matters that pertain to energy and the environment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Prieto, before we go on to... Sure. Very good. I did miss a public comment card on the last item, so I'm sorry. If you all could make room for Dr. Tom Williams. I've forgotten him in the last meeting. I don't want to forget him again. The sole comment card, Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club Water Committee. We're quite concerned. This organization, DWP, has a budget, roughly $7 billion of revenue. They have 10,000 employees. They got 400, let's say 1 million connections, and they can't get the billing right. This seems to be a problem. Now, how are they going to, quotes, may employ to adjust the capital spending? That's called deferred maintenance. It's called deferred replacement. Weren't the things that they had planned to replace vital? Or maybe they should be delayed because they're not needed if we're not going to be able to pay for them. So it seems to be a rather complicated system. There's no organization chart for this organization. Who's responsible for such problems? Are actions being taken to address those problems? We don't know. And that's a major issue. Visibility, transparency. They have 3 neighborhood council coordinators for 100 neighborhood councils. Do we see them? Once in a while, maybe once a year. So we're quite concerned about not being able to find out what's going on. But more importantly, deferred maintenance. When you have a system that has a replacement cycle of 300 years for water pipes? 300 years, not 3 years, 300. So we're quite concerned about these, and maybe they should go online again.
Thank you very much. Okay, very good, Mr. Prieto. Item number 3.
Number 3, motion Fuentes Bloomfield Labange relative to requesting instructing DWP and Bureau of Sanitation report on a variety of state legislative matters that pertain to energy and environment, including the governor's budget and so forth.
Very good. If we could have the Department of Sanitation to begin, and then we'll have DWP do their analysis. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Jim Marchese, Bureau of Sanitation. This committee has asked us to report back on the governor's proposed budget as it relates to energy and environmental issues which may impact the city. We think overall, from an environmental perspective, that there, in both terms of water and energy conservation, there exists a local need for funding in terms of water recycling, stormwater capture, and conservation. These multi-benefit projects would create jobs in local communities, open space in parks, and reduce flood damage and water pollution. As it relates to the governor's budget, they intend to use the recent increase in state revenues to fund environmental issues in California. Addressing the drought, Governor Brown's budget will make investments in water infrastructure and storage, regional water self-sufficiency, and habitat restoration. They are allocating about $618 million for water-related spending under the California Water Action Plan. Additionally, the administration intends to invest about $850 million of cap-and-trade auction proceeds to support efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, with an emphasis on assisting disadvantaged communities under the cap-and-trade expenditure plan. There are 2 agencies that have responsibilities for administering these plans. The first agency is the Natural Resource Agency. They're being funded at about $8.3 billion. They will administer the California Water Action Plan. There are 6 investment categories under the California Water Action Plan. One is to expand the water storage capacity. The second being safe drinking water projects, including wastewater projects for small disadvantaged communities, of which sanitation would like to see septic system replacements included in that particular category. Make conservation a way of life. Protect and restore important ecosystems, increase flood protection and reduce flood risk. And of particular importance to the Bureau of Sanitation is regional self-reliance. This includes the Integrated Regional Water Management Program, of which they're intending to allocate $472 million in grants for local projects. The city has a fully mature IRWIN program, and we would anticipate pursuing all funding under that particular program. That would include water recycling, stormwater capture, and desalination projects. Under the next administrating agency, which is Cal EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they're being funded at about $3.6 billion. It represents a 14.9% increase from last year. They will administer the cap-and-trade expenditure plan. Again, this is about $850 million in expenditures. They have 3 investment categories identified. One is the Sustainable Communities and Clean Transportation investment area. Of particular interest in that program area are the sustainable communities, the greenhouse gas reduction efforts, the climate change, and sustainability planning, and they are allocating about $100 million for that particular activity. The second investment category is energy efficiency and clean energy, including efficiency upgrades and weatherization. And last is the natural resources and waste diversion investment category, which is going to invest in waste management infrastructure, mainly involving clean composting. There are one agency reorganization under the State Water Resources Control Board. The Clean Drinking Water Program currently under the Department of Public Health is going to be transferred over to the State Water Resources Control Board. This is about 300 jobs and about $200 million being transferred into that agency with the intent to enhance accountability for water quality issues. The last budget proposal here as it relates to environment is the Department of Resources and Recycling and Recovery is currently operating the Beverage Container Recycling Fund at a $100 million deficit. The governor wants to get a handle on that. He's anticipating phasing out the subsidies to manufacturers, all administrative fee payments, to eliminate existing city and county payments to the tune of about $3.5 million, and to diversify the conservation course. As it relates to the California State Legislature and energy and environmental legislation, sanitation monitors and tracks about 350 bills per legislative session related to the environment. These impact our three program areas, our Clean Water Program, our Solid Resources Program, and our Watershed Protection Program, but we also keep an eye on issues related to sustainability, climate change, and renewable energy. Currently, we have 20 or so priority bills, including in the case of AB 371, which is the solace bill, which started out as the biosolids ban in Kern County. We've been working closely with the mayor's office to work on that piece of legislation. Last year, it was held on the assembly floor and wasn't advanced. This year, it was pulled forward and changed from a county ban to a monitoring bill. And so we see that we've been fairly successful in working on that particular piece of legislation to advance the city's program. The next couple of things that we're watching very closely and our colleagues at DWP intend to comment here on are the water bond bills that are being moved forward, which are the Rendon bill, the Walk bill, and the Canela bill. On our biomass and solid resources programs, we're closely looking at Senate Bill 498. We'd like to include in the definition of biomass our post-separated municipal waste as being eligible for those waste conversion technologies. And then, of course, closely near and dear to our hearts is the plastic bag bans. There are two bills that are being held. One is the statewide ban, which would include a preemption clause by Senator Padilla, Senate Bill 495, and then there is the AB 1337 Allen bill, which is the bill to ban bag bans, and that's also being held as well. Quickly before I ask our colleagues from DWP to weigh in on the state water bond bills, sanitation would advocate that we think there's a huge potential here in the water bond bills for conducting additional recycled water, stormwater capture. We think there are huge opportunities to address both water supply, drought, and water quality issues as well. Most of these funding bills have provisions already to address watershed protection and stormwater capture, groundwater protection, including wastewater collection system investments. We'd like to see additional money for recycled water planning, distribution, and wastewater treatment, and also include a funding mechanism for septic system replacement and getting folks onto the municipal wastewater system. Additionally, SAN advocates that to the extent that the Bay Delta ecosystem protections are being included in most of these funding bills, we'd also like to see the Los Angeles River also be similarly addressed. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Marty Adams from the Department of Water and Power. Just to add one thing quickly on the drought issues, we have been waiting for a new bill to be introduced by Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg. My understanding is that there should be a press conference this afternoon announcing the introduction of that bill, and hopefully the outline of that bill will have some opportunities for the conservation programs and some of the other regional water management practices that have been mentioned here. On the water bond, the water bond has been a big issue for a number of years, and there's been some changes, been concerns that the amount of money in the bond may not be acceptable to the public, it'll be difficult to pass. At the same time, we realize that it's got key components for California's water future that are in there. Two of the bills that were mentioned, Assembly Bill 1331 by Assemblymember Rindon and the Senate Bill 848 by Senator Walk, are the two primary bills that are getting the most attention right now. Both of these would effectively reduce the current water bond from about $11 billion to between $6.5 and $7 billion. So it has some cuts in there. The bills are interesting, and they may be more palatable to the public to pass. The biggest concern for us, probably a number of the members of the City Council were in the Assembly at the time that the original water bond was passed. And you know that we had a heavy lift to get an extra $1 billion included in that to make sure that groundwater is specifically called out to be addressed. Of all the city initiatives, we're looking at our water resource portfolio, and the fact that we really need to rely on more local supplies and not have such heavy reliance on imported water supplies. And as we try to capture stormwater and improve our recycled water portfolio and spread recycled water in the ground, none of those dreams can become reality if we can't clean up the groundwater basin and take that water back out. And so we worked extremely hard to get money earmarked that had to be for groundwater cleanup. So that is one thing that we don't see in these other bills. So if we're going to look to support those, I think that's a critical requirement because that's the most immediate thing that the city would benefit from in that. So that's something that's different than, and of course groundwater money not only for LA but for other areas, but even the San Fernando Basin, we would not be the only city to benefit, and we have one of the largest groundwater basins that there is to deal with. So we think that the lion's share of funding would be very important for the efforts that we have to make. Another question that was asked by the committee was the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, known as the BDCP. When we talk about the BDCP, it's really have to look at how that fits into the mix for what the city is doing for water supply. When I began with Water and Power 29 years ago, we took about 30% or maybe 20% of our water from Metropolitan Water District. And that has totally changed since then. Whereas we used to have 70% of the average year was aqueduct water from the LA Aqueduct in the Eastern Sierra. On average, we're about 45% of our city supply. And some of that is because we have court rulings, we have agreements to leave water behind. The Owens Lake Dust Mitigation Program is putting enough water to supply the city of San Francisco to control dust every year. Some of these things we might be able to turn around, but a lot of them are long-term cuts to the aqueduct deliveries. In the current year, over 60% of the water that fell in the Eastern Sierra that's tributary to the aqueduct has been left behind to meet the compliance agreements and the court orders that we have. So we have very little water coming down, and I expect next year, based on the current precipitation, we'll get about half the delivery this coming year as we are the present year. So it's not going to get any better. On the long term, we're looking to need about half of our water from Metropolitan Water District, and the majority of that for the city of LA, because of where we're geographically located, comes from the Sacramento Delta. And so it is a critical supply for us. And while our efforts are to improve our own local supply, we know that Delta will still be a critical piece of the mix for us. And so even as we try to shift away from it, it's still a vital component. I mean, the project was built just like the aqueduct is built for reasons because there's just not enough water falling in the Southland. We'll try to capture every drop of water we can here. We'll try to use every drop of water we can here, but it's still going to be an important piece of the mix if we want to have a reliable water supply and a reliable economy that comes from that. And again, like in this current year, we're looking at about over 70% of the city's water supply will come from the Delta because there just is not any other sources, and because we've lost so much of our groundwater due to contamination. The key to the BDCP is that there's a lot of risks to the Delta. There's risk to the fisheries. There's seismic risk to the Delta. The whole environment of the Delta with the levees and the islands is inherently unstable. There's risk to failure, which could cause seawater intrusion into the Delta, which could, for many years, impact the water quality to where it may be undrinkable. And then, of course, there's sea level rise issues due to climate change. And we know that the status quo can't continue. You have a lot of situations where you have farmers and private individuals that are charged with maintaining levees that literally impact the water supply for most of California. And so it's just an untenable situation. The BDCP provides a plan to build tunnels around the delta. It would improve the habitat. There's quite a few dollars for habitat restoration. It's designed to push the saltwater back out to have the delta flow the way it was originally intended. It'll also address issues like pollutants from upstream water users, invasive species, and other things that are stressing the delta environment. We know that the delta habitat is critical to wetlands habitats on the West Coast, not only just in the United States, but the entire West Coast of the whole Western Hemisphere. And so we know it has to be protected. One of the best ways to protect it is to do the BDCP, and because it's not just the water conveyance, but it's the entire package that gets all these things delivered. There was an environmental documents released December 9th in 2013. The comment period goes to April 14th this year, so it's coming to a close. The facilities are looked about $14.5 billion of capital, and then there's O&M and other habitat restoration dollars tied to this. We expect that the impact to the ratepayers in LA would be on average $2 to $3 per month per household as a residential user. So it's measurable. It's not huge. The downside of not having a reliable water supply is potentially catastrophic. So when I look at our 2010 Urban Water Management Plan, we've projected, I think, how do these things come together, that we would like to reduce our reliance on the purchased water that we buy from Metropolitan by 50%. So we want to cut that use in half. But that still is an important backstop for us. We know that our own supplies during wet years and dry years will vary, so we need that as a supply that's available, and we need to be reliable. And at the same time, the other hand, we're moving very rapidly on our local supplies and trying to develop those more so we have less reliance. But it is an entire portfolio, and so it's all part of the same water picture for LA. We hope to not need it as much, but we need it to be reliable. And so the BDCP, we've not formally commented as a city, but it is a step toward making that reliable. And certainly where LA sits physically located, we're kind of at a V between the Eastern Sierra and the Western Sierra, and everything comes to a hub here. So anything we do on either side of the hill impacts everybody else. And certainly because of our size alone, we are a major player in the water game. And so, we have to look at both optimizing our own use of water and then making sure that the water that we need and the communities around us need as well is reliable, because it all goes hand in hand. And there's no single piece that can be taken out and have the puzzle be complete.
Very good, thank you. Would you like to add anything else to?
No.
Members, any questions? Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of questions, and they're all related to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan.
Yes, sir.
First of all, with climate change, it's certainly possible that the snowpack is reduced or even disappears in the Sierras. If that happens, will these tunnels still be of use to us in supplying us with water?
It's a great question, and one of the things the state's dealing with is not only just capturing water, but capturing it and storing it. And so this is one of the things in the water bond was an issue of storage. And of course, there's always a question of who's paying for the storage and who's benefiting from the storage. We remember all the things in the agricultural water districts about that. In Southern California, one of the reasons that we're somewhat buffered from the current drought situation is because we've invested heavily in storage that Metropolitan Water District built at Diamond Valley Lake. So you kind of need all the pieces together. When the water is available, we need to be able to capture it. We need to be able to move it, and we need to be able to move it into storage. One of the things that we've done historically is store a lot of water locally in the San Fernando Basin. We need to be able to do that again. Of course, it'll only be of value if we can pull that water back out and it's clean drinking water. So it does go hand in hand, and we have actually in the past stored state water in the San Fernando Basin for use, because if you look at the size of us as a player, when we're able to pull on that source, we can take stressors off the delta, off the rest of the state, and the whole, and even just the local region itself. So it's important that all these pieces go together, because we don't know what we're going to have year to year. Every year will be different. If you look, even as a drying trend, there's still wet years in the drying trend, and we need to be able to take advantage of all those things.
Has there been any cost-benefit analysis or analysis of alternatives to this plan?
There's been quite a bit of study. DeLon Quan is here from our staff. Would you like to comment on any details? I brought all the experts.
So the draft Bay Delta Conservation Plan currently looked at, I think, like a dozen different alternatives. So the current proposed preferred alternative is the 9,000 CFS dual tunnel conveyance. Now, there are other options for a smaller size facility that's been evaluated, and some of that does rely on some local supply development, but that is not one of the preferred alternatives when you look at the main purpose of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan of having a goal of addressing the water supply reliability as well as the ecosystem restoration. So there are other alternatives that has been looked at by the draft Bay Delta Conservation Plan documents, but that is not one of the preferred alternatives. In terms of the one that's currently, that meets the co-equal goals is the 9,000 CFS dual tunnel system.
So of alternatives like more reliance on local water sources and recycling and all the other things that could be done locally in LA, has that been looked at as an alternative?
Well, from a City of LA standpoint, I mean, our 2010 Urban Water Management Plan does take into account local supply development going forward. There is still that component of the imported supply that will still be, to some extent, dependent upon Metropolitan Water District, who relies on supplies from the Bay Delta. So in terms of that, we do have plans going forward to develop local supplies for the City of LA.
Yeah. But in a sense, to answer your question, so the BDCP addresses that one particular issue. I think the whole water body issue and the emphasis that the state has on local supply development and getting reliance off the Delta for all of the state as a security measure. I think those things are going hand in hand. The BDCP is the one piece focused on that, though, and there's a lot of other efforts going on the whole other supply scenarios at the same time.
And LA is obviously doing a fair amount to conserve. Other areas like San Diego, not so much. Is there any plan to give us any kind of break or recognition of that fact?
I can't speak to the other communities, but we still have one of the lowest per capita water uses. We say we're the lowest per capita of any major city over 1 million in the country. We're one of the lowest per capita, period. And so we've done a great job. We are still, even though we've had a little bit of sliding off the conservation efforts, the mayor had a press conference last Wednesday out at the Hungus Spreading Grounds to remind everyone that we still have conservation rules that are in effect. We still have mandatory watering days and watering hours, but even without that reminder, we're still saving 17% below what our historic use was. So we're still in the use of the late 1970s, even though we have 1 million more people. So we have a tremendous track record. It doesn't mean we can't do more. Penny Falcon's heading up our conservation program, and we have a lot of efforts to be made, and we're now getting into the outdoor water use arena. So there's a lot more you'll see from us, and a lot of driving water demands down. And that, again, saves our customers money because it means that we're less reliant on imported water, which is also expensive water for us to replace.
Yeah, I'll be honest, one of my fears is that we actually, if we implement everything that we can, may not need much of this. In reality, if we recycled at the level that they are in Israel, which we could achieve, if we did more with stormwater, if we cleaned up all the wells in San Fernando Valley Aquifer, my fear is the water is going to go to farming, although they need it, and oil fracking in various places in the state, and we're going to be paying for more than our share, even if we don't need it as much.
Well, in a dry year like this one, even if we implemented all our recycled water, our conservation, and our stormwater capture plans, we're still going to be reliant on metropolitan imported water at 50% of our water supply during dry years. We are being aggressive with local water supplies, but it cannot supply all of our demand.
Well, it depends how far we go. I mean, Israel had a problem similar to ours. They did everything they possibly could, including desal, and they're actually now at a point where their water problem is permanently resolved. And there's no indication that we couldn't do something close to the same thing.
And some of it will rely on how fast regulations change on water reuse. And there's talk about direct potable reuse. I mean, we know what happened with spreading in the valley with that idea. And so will that be in the mix in the future? It's possible. At what time, we don't know. And then so part of it's timing, part of it's cost. At some point, you'll have to look at, what are the options and are they affordable? And so we believe that right now the Delta is part of our mix. We don't see in the near term that it's not going to be part of our mix. The biggest concern is how reliable is it, and is it sustainable? We do know that the way it operates now, it has environmental problems, and so it is a big ticket fix. But not only does it account for water delivery, but also equally takes care of those environmental problems. And so it would, the City of LA is a major player. Certainly there are a lot of people would share in the costs of it, and how those are apportioned is a topic of discussion right now.
Well, that's still my question. Do we feel like we're going to get ripped off and pay for more of our share, and perhaps a share that's ultimately, once we're doing all the things we could be doing, is only necessary in drought years and serious shortage years? Or are we going to be paying for our fair share of it?
And that's one of the things that we're very, very keen on safeguarding, to make sure that the citizens pay for their share and get their value out of it. So that's one of the things that we're constantly involved with as discussions go forward.
And maybe that's even something we should ask our ratepayer advocate to take a closer look at, too, to make sure we feel that we are getting charged appropriately if this has to go forward.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield. Thank you. Sort of a procedural thing. We raised a lot of issues on the governor's budget of all the different things that are happening and how it impacts LA. What's the next process in terms of taking some of those ideas, prioritizing them, and trying to impact change in Sacramento? Having spent quite a bit of time picking apart the governor's budget and changing the governor's budget in a past life, I can tell you a lot of that stuff is happening now. The earlier that we engage up there's subcommittee hearings. It's much easier to make the tweaks here and there, and then as it goes forward, it's still possible, but it takes a lot bigger of a lift after it's been through the subcommittee hearings and it's sort of etched in stone a little bit more. So what's the process from the analysis that you just gave us in terms of the bills and things that impact us to us taking action as a city and engaging on the issue?
From sanitation's perspective, we've been able to work through our associations and some of our committee membership as far as the California agencies, sewerage agencies, and some other partnerships as well. The city on a whole has the opportunity to participate in those discussions and development as well. I think we've had some good input into the budget so far. We've seen an increase in revenue and spending in the areas of environmental issues, and we're pleased at the progress so far. As a procedural item, our list of recommendations could be forwarded to the full council. We could develop those issues and have those available to take forward as a policy matter.
I think the chair is going to speak to some of this in terms of suggestions, but I hope to say that we've got a lot of potential if we coordinate, and it's great to go through the sanitation coalitions and agencies, but having been up there and having chaired the budget committee, I could tell you that has much less of an impact than if the City of LA and the members of the City of LA are engaged in working to make that change.
Wendy Yancey, Water and Power. Just to add to the Bureau of Sanitation's comments, basically to move this forward and to get some of these ideas enacted, we would actually need resolutions from the council, support positions, that would actually help us to go up and talk to folks about the different things we want to see happen. While the mayor said, and then the mayor would have to concur, because they set the legislative agenda for the city. So.
Thank you. Teed up.
Thanks, Bob. We're going to go there. Mr. Koretz, did you have more? Going once, going twice?
Solved.
Very good. So can you help me understand what what the utility's current position on BDCP is? Were there measures that were adopted by the commission? Do we have a position today?
The city has not formally taken a position on BDCP. I know that it's looking at the project and preparing comments, but the city's not taken a formal position on it yet.
Very good. And, I heard loud and clear that it's not that we're trying to put all of our eggs in one basket here. It's going to be a confluence of projects, resources to better stabilize Los Angeles' position. But I think Penny mentioned that even if we had the San Fernando Basin up and running, which is a $900 million, by some estimates, sort of endeavor to be able to capture stormwater out there and runoff, even if we had all of that sort of in place, we would still rely on the Delta's contribution to Los Angeles. Did you say it was 15% or so?
No, in a dry year.
In a dry year?
In dry year, about 50.
About 50. 50.
50, okay.
In a normal year, I think our target is about 25, 30.
Yeah, something
if
like
we implement all our local water supply reliability plans.
If you look at the picture, we've cut our reliance on the water that we have water rights to by almost half. And so we're looking to do the same thing on the state projects. That'll be about a 50% turnaround on our reliance on all imported supplies, which is a huge step forward. As Councilmember Corrett said, it may not be the end-all be-all. There may be more that can be done. But that alone will be a heavy lift. Will be substantial investment. It means that a lot of projects, including the huge groundwater treatment project, which will be the biggest thing of its kind in the world, all have to be up and running.
Right.
So what we can do after that, the future is yet to tell us.
Sure. And I think, I want to thank Mr. Koretz as well, because he also mentioned that the ratepayer advocate should sort of weigh in on the cost benefit of that, because your estimate is that it would be about $2 to $3 per consumer
per month yep.
On average in order sort of to pay for our share of the restoration. But to me, I think we have to do it all. And in dry years, it sounds like we'll have to sort of be heavier on the reliance of the imports. And if we're doing everything right, we'll be relying less on the imports, which is real good news, which I think speaks to the importance of our advocacy, as Mr. Blumenfield was teeing up here in Sacramento, because we have to, I think, really be present at the conversations to leverage whatever funding that we can get. I mean, again, the San Fernando Basin remediation efforts, the estimates that you all have given us is between $600 and $900 million, and we all know that those localized water solutions are the best investment and will pay for themselves more so than the imports. But nonetheless, we're going to have to do a lot, which means that we really have to be heard. So I would like to, if it's okay with the committee, ask that you all and Bureau of Sanitation work with the CLA to craft legislative resolutions relative to the positions that you all would like for us to consider to take on legislation and on the budget in Sacramento, in the legislature, to protect the city's interest and to begin to prepare the comments that you mentioned, the April 14th deadline on the comment period for the BDCP and water bond. I think that's what water bond is, probably just advocacy. Comments is on BDCP, and begin to prepare those, because I think what would be absolutely problematic is if we're not lodging our concerns relative to those matters in a timely fashion. So hopefully, if there isn't any concern, we would ask you to do that and report back to the committee so that we can consider those positions and lodge our concerns quickly, and also include, and as Marty, as you mentioned, the late-breaking drought relief package announcement today, whatever that is, nobody has seen language yet, to include that too, because I think we have to Mr. Blumenfield's point, really leverage our position in Sacramento. If we can be compelling, then we'll be able to leverage whatever dollars they'll give us with dollars here so that we can get all of this up and going, because it's really disconcerting. I mean, every day I'm reading more and getting more and more worried about water. I'm going to start bringing a bucket into the shower, just like the fellow who was quoted in the Los Angeles Times today. I mean, we're going to have to really understand that we may have to begin to accept a lower standard of water if we're going to be smart and do everything, Mr. Koretz, that you would like for us to do so that we don't rely on imports. So that being said, that will be the order. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
There are comment cards. If we could have Mr. Lipkis come on up from Tree People. Good to see you, Andy. Alexandra Naji, did I pronounce that properly, from Food and Water Watch, and Kirsten James, and Lee Wallach. Those will be the first 4, and then we'll announce the next 4 after you present. Mr. Lipkus.
Lee left and said I could have his other 2 minutes, but I'll leave that up to you. Lee Wallach left. Thank you very much for asking the question about the possibilities. And clearly, you've been studying this, and you're on the right beam. We have an unprecedented opportunity right now to use this crisis, this disaster and long-term crisis, to do what you're talking about, to have Los Angeles, not just the city, but city, county, and region together, be able to have the strength to command the federal and the state response to build LA's next resilient supply. We can do it. In doing that, we would be redirecting a lot of the money that we spend in energy to lift water and bring it here, and instead of investing in petroleum, invest in human energy, jobs in this region, and rebuilding this economy and rebuilding this local water supply. It can happen. We can have the nation's first smart water grid, especially if we follow the lead of not just Israel, but Australia, who came through, just finished a 12-year historic drought and survived and thrived, doing what we're laughing about now, but they took their water use from areas like Melbourne, 100 gallons per person per day, down to 60 or 50. Brisbane, from 80 gallons per person per day down to 30. People changed their lifestyles. They did it by distributing to them heavily discounted rain tanks, capture the water. It's important when I say that, people laugh, but it rains here. On the driest year in recorded history this past year, it still rained 3.6 inches, which, if you use the conservative side, DWP said we throw away, sanitation says we throw away 7.6 billion gallons per inch of rainfall. That means last year we threw away over 13 billion gallons. That's enough for nearly 7,000 gallons per person in the city of LA. It could have been online now. The way they did it in Australia was to distribute these resources. People got their tanks, they had their own private water bank account, and they radically changed their behavior. They were then part of their new supply. I'd love to brief you much deeper, and if you can give me 30 more seconds, I'll wrap up. And I just wanted to say that the way to get there is through really deep collaboration between the 2 agencies that were just sitting here. The good news is they're doing it. We've been building this with them since 1992, when they studied the feasibility of building LA Supply, but they're moving slow. They're working behind the scenes in a partnership with us now, building an emergency response to bring recycled water to save the trees around Los Angeles. We'll talk about that, but they're getting it together. The way we can make this happen, though, is to move it into a full-time collaboration, like an emergency command center, just like the governor called for today in the state's emergency command center. If we do that locally, and we currently today have at the table LA County, DWP, and city sanitation, county public health. We're all working together with LA Unified Schools to build a local response. We haven't been able to share it with you publicly because, like the mayor, we want to promise low, deliver high, but it's happening. But we'll need your leadership to move it to this full-scale approach. So they deserve credit for doing the work, but we can really accelerate it beyond their dreams with your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Lipkus. And thank Mr. Wallach for his patience. Alexandra Naji, did I pronounce that properly?
That's me. Yes, you did. Okay, Alexandra with Food and Water Watch, and I'm here to comment on the BDCP. Just first off, the Brown administration has yet to provide a detailed breakdown of the overall 30-year cost of the project, even in the 34,000-page EIR that was released in December. And Mark Cohen, the director of the Department of Water Resources himself, confirmed that even though Brown's numbers are $25 billion, the numbers are more accurately $51 to $67 billion. And in a poll that was recently done, with the $25 billion mark in mind, a majority of Californians and even Los Angeles residents said that they do not want this project. It's too costly, and local water, as we know, is more feasible and is what we need to invest in. So even with the $2 to $3 per household that would go to the BDCP, we really should be putting that money for local water and the groundwater cleanup in the San Fernando Valley Basin. I had a meeting with Ron Nichols before he left, and he said that the BDCP isn't going to bring any new water to LA. There's no new water in the system. It's just a transfer mechanism, but that still won't bring any new water to LA. And so we're really investing in a project that won't benefit us in any real way, even with the reliability claim of the BDCP. The reliability claim comes from the earthquake threat in the Delta, but we've seen how tunnels are not impervious to breakages. So we had a break with the Northridge earthquake from the tunnel that goes out to Ojai, and that broke. And so what's going to be the difference if there is an earthquake in the Delta? Will these tunnels be relieved of that? And then finally, I just want to say that we are in a severe drought, and the State Water Project is shut off, and the tunnels will be shut off in dry years. And so we need to make investments now. And we know that local water is cheaper, and for every $1 billion that's invested in local water, 99% of that does stay local and has an incredible multiplier effect with jobs. And so I would recommend that the council actually do their own cost-benefit analysis of the BDCP, since the state hasn't done one yet, and it's really what we need to study.
Very good, thank you. Before Ms. James begins, if we can ask Connor Evitz, Melanie Winter, and Dr. Tom Williams to come to the table as well. Ms. James.
Good afternoon, Kirsten James with Heal the Bay. I want to thank you for having this important discussion today, and I urge the committee to take this discussion to the next level. And what I mean by that is looking at what is going on in Sacramento in terms of meeting our water goals, both in the context of meeting Clean Water Act requirements through implementation of the MS4 permit, and also just all of the local water supply goals that the city has had for a number of years. In coming to this hearing today, I just looked back at the 2008 water supply plan, and so many of the goals in here are things that haven't been realized yet to date, and that we, keep saying, but we just aren't doing. I was at the Recycled Water Advisory Task Force this morning, and we were talking about, cleaning up the San Fernando groundwater basin, and that needs to be a priority. We need to have indirect potable as a priority, and the state might help. The water bonds hopefully will be a piece of that puzzle, but likely it's not going to be enough. And so we need to also look internally at what we need to do to identify those gaps that the state water bond, the Bay Delta Conservation Plan are just not going to fill. And so things that we need to think about locally are revitalizing the stormwater funding measure that stalled at the county level. We need to get that going again. We need to think about the Save Our Streets measure in terms of green streets and how we can use multiple benefit projects there. We need to think about supporting Prop 218 reform to be able to more easily get funding at the local level. That's something that Heal the Bay is really prioritizing this year as well. And also in terms of the LADWP rate increases, we need to think about how we can do that in terms of meeting those local water supply goals. So we really need to reflect on what we already have in place as far as goals and how we are going to achieve them. So I urge you to look both at the statewide level, but also look locally at how we're going to achieve these benefits. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club Water Committee. We oppose the peripheral tunnels. Number one, how much water will they supply? Enough for 40 million people. Those two tunnels can supply approximately 6.5 million acre feet per year, which is virtually replacing the entire water supply. Where will it go? Into the California Water Project. Will it come across the Tehachapi? That may be an issue. We don't believe a lot of it will. So we're very strong on supporting any conservation methods, any recycle, reuse, anything you want to do with it, because it's one water. We want it. We need it. We have a lot here in the basin already. We've contaminated it. We've done a whole bunch of things. But we need the money from the state to not require them to build the peripheral tunnels for the city of LA and are other water districts, and one of the litmus tests for many of the water district elections that are coming up is the BDCP. Will they support it? Some will, some won't. Can we help other people here in Southern California by example? Yeah. Why not have the DWP and the Bureau of Sanitation prepare a matrix, very simple one. Which bills in the state legislature right now, or thought to be now, are pro-conservation, pro-reuse, pro-recycled water? All of these so that the people of the city of Los Angeles can use those to say, we want to vote. Through the ballot? No, through our letters and our communications with our...
Very good, thank you. Ms. Winter. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Melanie Winter. I'm the founder and director of the River Project. We have been working closely with the Bureau of Sanitation and the Department of Water and Power on these issues for for going on 20 years, but certainly with the IRP for nearly 15 now. The two departments, as you are seeing, coming to testify together, their partnerships are strengthening, and it makes sense that they do. As we build our local water supply and work towards an awareness of one water in Los Angeles, having these two agencies partner seamlessly and support each other is one of the most important things we can do here. As Alexandra said, the money that is spent locally for local water stays local. And she mentioned a multiplier, but she didn't mention what that multiplier can be. BDCP money cannot fund and does not, that money spent directly does not reduce local flooding. It does not help us meet our TMDL mandates. Investing in local water supply, capturing, conserving, reusing, that does. Every time we infiltrate to groundwater, we clean up water supply in the most cost-effective way possible. Working property by property throughout Los Angeles, we can change the way Los Angeles functions. We've been doing that with our Water LA program funded by the Coastal Conservancy and partnering with many of the organizations here. Conservation push is critical this year. People are out there hearing and seeing on the freeway we're in a drought, take shorter showers. They do that already. They want to know what else they can do. Gray water, other solutions, rain gardens, rain barrels. We need to push hard. We need to lead on this and support these programs and utilize that additional MET funding in a very, very public way. We need public relations campaigns. We need to lead the people to do better. Continuing to say that we do well on conservation and we rock at it and we're the best in you can do the numbers differently. We don't. We can do a lot better. It's counterproductive to continuously say that we are amazing at conservation if we know we need to improve. So that's one thing we need to push on this year. Building local supply gets us a multiplier beyond what you see on paper. BDCP money cannot do that. Yes, we need BDCP for a long time in the future. We need the water project for a long time in the future. It's not going anywhere if we don't invest in BDCP. As I see many of you vote, you're concerned for your constituents' wallets. There is a limited amount they're willing to invest. That money, they want to invest it here. We're not going to lose the state water project money that exists if we don't invest in BDCP.
Thank you very much. We are going to go ahead and move on to item 7. I'll take that out of order if it's okay. Item 7, the Bureau of Sanitation.
Certainly. Item number 7. CO report relative to proposed contract with USA Waste Management and Sobriety Landfill for landfill disposal services. Staff from Bureau of Sanitation and CAO.
Very good. If you could keep your comments brief here, tell us what it is that we're doing.
Good afternoon, Wilson Poon with the Office of the CAO. Item 7 on the agenda today is a CAO report which is recommending the Council authorize the Bureau of Sanitation to execute a 15-and-a-half-year contract with USA Waste of California to provide landfill disposal services at its El Sobrante landfill in Corona, California. On a daily basis, the city collects about 3,600 tons of residential solid waste, mostly from the black bins materials, and about 600 is sent over to El Sobrante. Most of the rest is sent over to Sunshine Canyon. The term of the contract, as I mentioned, is about 5 years with 2 5-year renewal options and an additional 6-month extension. I did want to make a technical correction here. The CAO report is recommending that the contract be effective retroactively till January 1st. That needs to be amended to read execute to be effective upon the date of execution. The previous contract expired December 31st. At the time the CAO report was written, we were trying to prevent any disruption of services, have it effective January 1st. However, during that time, the Bureau was able to execute a LOA to kind of extend the services. So once this contract is executed, the LOA will be terminated. There is no cost ceiling in this contract. The city's financial obligation is limited by the amount that is approved in the corresponding year's budget. We are estimating about $5 million a year on average. Sufficient funds are available in the Solid Waste Resources Revenue Fund, and our office is recommending that the council approve this contract.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Hearing and seeing none, that item will move out of the committee unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation. Colleagues, I don't have any cards on any other items, and if it's okay with you all, I'd like to put them on consent unless there is an objection to items number 5 and 6.
I have a quick question on item 6.
Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and approve item 5 on consent, and we'll go to item 6. I'm sorry, on consent is items 4 and 5.
4 and 5, okay.
Are approved unanimously and moved to the council, and we are now presenting on item number 6.
Item 6, DWP and Sierra report shall propose agreements for electrical transmission distribution equipment relative to greenhouse gas reporting program.
Randy Howard, DWP. What you have before you today is a set of contracts. The Department of Water and Power jointly owns multiple large electrical stations and transmission systems with other participants. In some cases, we have joint ownership agreements to allow us to do the operating for those projects. Because of EPA rules, one party needs to report on SF6 gases. These gases are used inside the circuit breakers and the switch gear to ensure that it doesn't arc when it switches. So when a large transmission cable terminates into a station, there's contacts in there for the breakers, and this gas is used within those breakers. So it has a lot of GHG content, and so what we're just doing here is agreeing with the parties. We will do the reporting obligation. There's no cost to it, and it just amends the existing contracts.
Mr. Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that this is probably the most potent greenhouse gas that anybody is tracking. And my question is, it appears that emissions of SF6 are reducing partly because of a voluntary effort called the SF6 Partnership. And there's that's a voluntary program led by the EPA. I understand there's 81 signatories to the partnership, but the DWP isn't one of them. Is there a reason why we're not participating in that?
I actually don't have a response to that, but I can certainly get back to you. I'm not aware of the partnership. This is related to existing greenhouse gas SF6 in the existing breakers today and a reporting obligation. But I can certainly look at this coalition and determine why DWP is not a signatory to that process.
That would be great. So if we could ask for a report back just on that one specific item, and otherwise I'm fine with this item going forward.
Understanding that this is primarily reporting, Mr. CLA, is it okay for us to move this item and then ask, do we have to introduce a motion to have a report back on the SF6 collaboration?
That's one way to approach it. The other way is to move it forward, since it does have a time limit deadline, and have the department report at that time in council to Mr. Kretz as to the status of that membership.
If that's amenable to you, Mr. Kretz?
That would be great.
Very good. So that item is moved out,
Thank you.
unless Mr. Blumenfield, do you have any questions, unanimously. Very good. That brings us to general public comment. Dr. Tom Williams is not here. We are adjourned. Thank you. Very good.